I realized the Count saw far beyond mere romance. "This is my personal wish, my lord. My father and I are distant. This has nothing to do with family politics." Uninformed, the Count muttered, his expression shifting. He fell silent, weighing the consequences. Finally, he made his decision. "I understand your feelings, but this is a grave matter that cannot be rushed." He looked at me. "Your surname makes this political. I need time to observe." The Count's gaze sharpened toward the northern wilderness. "Harold will not let this defeat slide. His next retaliation will be brutal, and Conford will be the first target." "You want my daughter? Fine. But a Rochefort will not marry a man who cannot prove he can survive in the north and protect his own land. We will table this. After the autumn harvest, when the Solonians strike again, if you can defend your castle and prove your worth." He paused, his eyes dark. "We shall talk again. I have no desire to see my daughter betrothed to a dead man." The cold reality hit us both, like ice water. Charlotte looked disappointed, but deeply concerned for me. I clenched my fists, my resolve hardening. I met the Count's gaze. "I understand. I will prove that Conford will not fall, and I will not be a corpse." "Good. I look forward to it. You may leave." Charlotte and I exchanged a look, and I bowed before exiting. The heavy door closed, shutting away the Count's gaze. Standing in the corridor, I exhaled, my mind a whirlwind. The Count hadn't refused outright, which was a victory. Yet, the weight of the test ahead felt like a mountain. Surviving the next Solonian siege would be no small feat, but I wouldn't retreat. For Charlotte and Conford, I had to win. My mother would support me, but my opportunistic father, Duke Schmidt, was an unknown variable. Politically, an alliance with the northern governor should be favorable to the Schmidt family. The royal capital's opinion was a problem for another day. Cross that bridge when I come to it, I thought, pushing the worries aside. I headed toward the barracks to find Leon and share the news that he had been accepted into my service. The cavalrymen paused their work to salute me respectfully. Their eyes held a new sense of recognition. They were brothers in arms now. Leon was checking his saddle when I approached. He stood straight, looking nervous yet expectant. "Leon," I said. I spoke with the Count. I paused, watching Leon's throat bob. "He has agreed. You and your cavalry are now formally under my command at Conford." Leon's eyes lit up with disbelief, his body relaxing as he stammered. "Thank you, Lord Carl. I will not fail you." I smiled, then turned serious. "Don't celebrate yet. You are my subordinate now, and you will follow my rules. Conford has its own discipline. Forget how things were done in France City or Hawk territory. Here, we follow my code." Leon stood at attention. "Yes, my lord. I understand." He attempted a clumsy, earnest Conford-style salute. I chuckled and patted his shoulder. "Relax, you'll learn the rules." More importantly, my gaze turned sincere. "Thank you, Leon. Thank you for your trust and for choosing to follow me." Leon felt a surge of warmth and renewed determination. He nodded firmly. "It is my honor. I will stand with you to avenge the Hawk family and secure Conford's future." "Excellent," I nodded. "Your first task, inventory your men, equipment, horses, and supplies. We return to Conford soon. Prepare accordingly." "Understood, my lord." Leon saluted and began shouting orders to assemble his troops. I felt a sense of relief watching Leon work. Securing a capable commander and a corps of cavalry was a major victory for my trip to France City. With Leon handled, I returned to the governor's mansion to wait for Charlotte. I hoped for a final word, even if just a simple farewell. I found Charlotte already waiting in the plaza. She had regained her composed, aristocratic demeanor. Yet, her blue eyes held a lingering complexity. She walked toward me. "Carl," she said, her voice steady. "Charlotte," I replied, surprised. "Why are you here?" "And the Count?" "Father is busy," she interrupted, looking down. "I've thought it over. I cannot return to Conford with you." I understood immediately. "I understand," I said gently. "Now that the Count knows, it would be improper for an unmarried noblewoman to visit a bachelor lord's castle." I smiled bitterly. "We are lucky the northern frontier is isolated. Otherwise, our secret would be the talk of the royal capital." Charlotte offered a faint, helpless smile. She looked at me earnestly. "Carl, be careful." Father's words were harsh, but true. "The Solonians will return with greater force. Conford will face an unprecedented test. Strengthen your defenses, stockpile supplies, and train your men. Don't slacken. If you need help, ask my father. I will come to assist you." Her genuine concern warmed me, strengthening my resolve. "Rest assured," I promised. "Conford is my home. I will not let it fall, nor will I disappoint you. Wait for my good news." Charlotte gazed at me, as if memorizing my face. "Take care," she whispered. "You too," I replied. We stood in silence, aware of the prying eyes of guards and officials. We both knew any display of affection would be inappropriate and troublesome. Without a hug or further words, we parted with restrained composure. I walked toward the barracks without looking back. I stayed at the camp that night. The Count's staff worked efficiently. 500 militia were assembled by morning. I inspected the new recruits at dawn. They were sturdy, calloused men with hopeful, if slightly bewildered, expressions. Recruited from farms and mines around France City, they were hard-working and honest. With fair pay and treatment, they would make loyal soldiers. I noted their families accompanied them. I registered them all to bring to Conford. Soldiers with families in the territory were more motivated to defend their home. Leon's 50 cavalrymen were also ready. I mounted my horse at the head of the column. Behind me followed the cavalry, the militia and their families, and wagons loaded with supplies provided by the Count. The procession marched through France City. Crowds cheered, rooting for the defenders of the northern frontier. The scene reminded me of my first departure months ago. People had cheered then, too. But now, I was no longer a disgraced second son, but a successful frontier lord. The cheers were filled with genuine respect. Yet, I didn't see the one person I wanted to see. Neither Charlotte nor the Count appeared. Only a scribe arrived to convey final blessings and logistics. I understood why. The Count was maintaining distance to protect our relationship from public scrutiny. It was a silent reminder. Until I proved myself, nothing was certain. I took one last look at the governor's mansion. Then, I spurred my horse and led the column forward. I led my mixed force back to Conford without incident. As the fortress and the orderly settlement appeared on the horizon, the travelers murmured in surprise. They had expected a desolate, crumbling ruin. After all, it was a long-abandoned Plantagenet outpost. They only came for the settlement allowance and military pay. But the sight before them defied their expectations. Sturdy stone walls, defensive towers, thriving farmland, and neat stone houses. It was a vibrant, orderly scene, far from the barbaric wasteland they feared. The majestic castle atop the hill provided them with a profound sense of security. To them, a grand castle signified a powerful, wealthy, and reliable lord. "Look at that castle. The crops look great. It's not as scary as they said. We came to the right place." The whispers among the recruits shifted to relief and joy. Their anxiety vanished as they saw the prosperous, secure settlement. This was exactly what I intended. A thriving home served as the best recruitment advertisement and stabilizer. As the column approached, Conford serfs stopped their work in the fields and workshops to cheer and salute their lord. "The lord is back," they shouted. "Look, he brought so many people." This genuine display of respect gave the new militia a clear sense of my prestige and influence. I nodded to my subjects as I rode toward the castle gates. Brendan, Richter, and Roland were waiting there. Seeing the large force of militia and fine cavalry behind me, they were visibly thrilled. "My lord," Brendan stepped forward, his voice brimming with joy. "Are these?" I dismounted and handed my reins to a groom. "These are reinforcements from the Count. 500 trained militia and Commander Leon's cavalry. Brendan, Richter, Roland, it's up to you to train them into a fighting force." Brendan looked at the sturdy recruits and the spirited cavalry, trembling with excitement. "Understood, my lord. I will forge them into Conford's finest warriors immediately." This influx of manpower was exactly what the territory needed. Richter and Roland saluted, their eyes filled with confidence. I turned to Edgar. "Mr. Moore, arrange housing for the recruits and their families. Expand the barracks if necessary. Ensure everyone has shelter. Also, prioritize the cavalry's horses. Expand the stables and provide the best feed: oats, grass, and peas. Even if the people have to ration, the horses come first." Edgar bowed. "Yes, my lord. I will handle it immediately." He quickly began organizing the registration and logistics. I then turned to the scribe, old Moore, who had arrived slightly behind the others. I steadied him. Mr. Moore, oversee the expansion of the barracks and stables. Simple structures will suffice for the summer. We can reinforce them before winter. Old Moore nodded and set to work. Under the command of Brendan and Richter, the militia settled into the barracks. Leon led his cavalry to the expanding stables to tend to their mounts. Edgar placed the families in temporary housing until permanent homes could be built. Seeing the once quiet camp bustling with life, I felt a surge of determination. I looked at the sky. June had arrived, and the northern frontier's summer was fleeting. With only 2 months until the Solonians traditionally launched their autumn raids, I knew Harold would return with overwhelming force. I was resolved to turn Conford into an iron fortress, ready to break the Solonians' teeth should they dare to attack. Impressed by the effectiveness of the breastwork, I summoned scribe old Moore to the study. Mr. Moore, I said, pointing to the map, the breastwork proved its worth, but we cannot wait for the enemy to reach our core defenses. We need greater strategic depth and early warning capabilities. I indicated the farmland and residential area below the castle. I intend to build permanent fortifications there. I want to connect key points with stone towers and walls to form an outer defensive line. Moore frowned, concerned. My lord, are you saying we should stop treating the outer area as a sacrificial buffer and instead commit resources to hold it? I recalled the previous strategy of retreating to the core castle if necessary. No, Mr. Moore, I corrected. The outer area remains expendable, but there is a difference between strategic withdrawal and immediate collapse. I walked to the wall map and tapped the terrain around Conford. This battle proved our soldiers are as capable as any Solon elite when properly equipped and positioned. We must stop panicking and retreating at the first sight of the Solon army. Retreating destroys morale and abandons the crops, homes, and workshops our subjects have labored to build, undermining the very foundation of this territory. I added sternly. Most importantly, if we retreat, we fail our duty as the northern frontier's outpost. If the Solonians block our access to the valley, they can trap us on the hill while they ravage the northern territory or besiege France City. I traced a line on the map. By extending our defense to the foot of the hill, the situation changes entirely. This line will be a thorn in their side. To threaten France City, they must first neutralize us, forcing them to commit thousands of troops to a siege. I acknowledged the risks. Yes, it stretches our lines and increases our exposure, but it also provides a springboard for our cavalry to harass their supply lines and seize the initiative. By pinning them here, we relieve pressure on France City. Every soldier they commit to Conford is one less attacking the city. This is the strategic purpose Count Rochefort intended for Conford, to be the shield and sword of the North. We must not fail him. Moore's expression shifted from concern to realization as he listened to my bold vision. He saw that I, his young lord, was evolving into a ruler with true regional strategic foresight. He, too, was reluctant to abandon the hard-won infrastructure of the settlement. The new strategy was clearly more proactive. However, Moore raised a practical concern. My lord, it is almost July. The peas and rye are ready for harvest. If we divert labor to construction now, will it jeopardize our winter food supply? I was prepared. Do not worry, Mr. Moore. Our recent victory has established Conford's reputation for safety. I expect an influx of refugees and freemen seeking stability, which will bolster our labor force. Furthermore, I explained, the outer walls do not need to be as massive as the castle. We will use rammed earth construction to build 4 to 5 meter walls quickly and efficiently. I ordered the walls reinforced with a 1 meter thick stone exterior and internal timber supports. A combat platform, wide enough for 2 soldiers, must be built 1 to 1.5 meters behind the wall to facilitate defense. I then issued a decisive order. In my name, declare a total mobilization. Inform the subjects that the Solonians will return with a greater offensive. If Conford falls, everyone faces annihilation. Defending our home is defending their own lives and property. Increase labor duties. After the recent battle and funeral, the people will support us. We must give our all. Seeing my unwavering resolve, Maul's doubts vanished. Maul nodded solemnly. Understood, my lord. I will draft the order, organize the men, and survey the terrain immediately. Everyone in Conford will fight for our home. The scribe bowed and hurried off. With the fortifications planned, I turned my attention to the muskets, which had proven decisive in battle. The post-battle report had arrived. Of over 600 Solonians killed, at least 200 died from musket lead balls. This confirmed the musket's lethal efficiency in defensive warfare. Especially within 50 paces, flintlock volleys tore through Solonian heavy armor, causing massive casualties. Yet, their value went beyond mere kills. I recalled the critical moment when Solon berserkers nearly breached the spear formation. 2 volleys from the musketeers acted like a hammer, crushing the enemy's momentum and will to fight. The despair caused by unavoidable, armor-piercing death was devastating to morale. Watching comrades turn into corpses while facing invisible, thunderous death broke even the bravest warriors. Unlike bows or complex cold weapons requiring years of training, musketeers could be trained quickly. A healthy farmer could learn the basics in a month. 3 months of intensive training would produce a formidable unit. This was highly attractive for Conford's rapid military expansion. I aimed to turn half of the 500 militia provided by the Count into musketeers. I planned to integrate at least 200 into my existing squad to form a core ranged force. However, the bottleneck was not manpower, but the muskets themselves. Production relied entirely on Hector, the sole master gunsmith. Despite my orders to train apprentices, progress remained slow. Hector clung to a closed, small workshop production style. He handled all core tasks, barrel forging, lock assembly, and final tuning, personally, leaving apprentices with only menial labor. This resulted in extremely low output. Even working day and night, they produced only 5 flintlocks a month, occasionally supplemented by simple matchlock muskets. This was insufficient for my needs. Determined to change this, I left the Lord's Hall for the workshop to speak with Hector. As I approached, the heat and rhythmic hammering grew louder. Pushing open the door, I was hit by a wave of heat, coal, and sweat. The furnace glowed, turning the walls red. Hector, shirtless and scarred, hammered away with intense focus. He was carefully shaping a red-hot iron bar over a steel core, the most critical step in barrel forging. Noticing the apprentices were absent, I stepped closer. Hector, not looking up, roared impatiently. I told you not to disturb me during forging. You can't learn this yet. Get out. I stopped. When no one left, Hector turned to yell again. Are you deaf? I told you. Seeing me, his rage instantly vanished, replaced by shock and panic. He dropped his tools, flustered. My lord. I apologize. I thought it was those clumsy boys. I waved him off. It's fine, Hector. I didn't warn you. Continue. Work comes first. I looked at the cooling iron. Is this barrel important? Hector looked pained. Yes, my lord. This high-quality wrought iron is at the critical stage. If I stop now, the temperature drop will ruin the metal's resilience. I understand, I said, gesturing for him to continue. Carry on, I'll just watch. Hector nodded gratefully and resumed his rhythmic hammering. Despite my silence, Hector grew visibly uncomfortable. His movements stiffened, his rhythm faltered, and he sweated more, glancing at me nervously. Finally, Hector stopped. Embarrassed, he pleaded, My lord, I have a bad habit. I can't work when someone watches. I get nervous, my hands shake. This barrel might. I understood. I knew skilled craftsmen often had quirks. External pressure could ruin their focus on delicate tasks. I nodded gently. I see. My apologies for the intrusion. I stepped back toward the door. I'll wait outside. Finish the barrel, then we shall talk. The matter is important, but it can wait. Hector sighed in relief, expressing his gratitude. Thank you for your understanding, my lord. I will finish as quickly as possible. I turned and waited patiently outside the workshop. Inside, the rhythmic hammering resumed. After a long while, the hammering finally ceased. I knew Hector had likely finished the critical shaping of the barrel. The heavy wooden door opened, and Hector emerged. Bare-chested and drenched in sweat, Hector looked exhausted yet satisfied. He took a long, refreshing swig from a small ceramic bottle. Conford produced no alcohol, and my supply list excluded such luxuries. The wheat ale was a dwindling stock brought by Edgar from the Schmidt family. I, who rarely drank, knew that skilled craftsmen often had such quirks. As the top level 1 craftsman, Hector accepted lower pay in exchange for a guaranteed supply of ale. I, valuing his expertise, agreed. Is the barrel finished? I asked. Hector wiped his mouth. Not yet, my lord. It's just a rough forging. It must cool before the next step. I need to file and scrape the interior and exterior to ensure smoothness. Any burrs could cause a jam or explosion. Did you need me for something? I replied calmly. I wanted to discuss potential improvements to our workflow. I got to the point. How is the progress on reducing the musket caliber and overall weight? Hector frowned, looking troubled. That's difficult, my lord. A smaller caliber requires even higher internal smoothness. Hand filing standard barrels is already strenuous. Smaller ones would be nearly impossible to maintain with current tools. Unless we have specialized equipment, like a small water-powered or manual drilling machine, the scrap rate will be too high. I nodded. A drilling machine. I will make a note of that and find a way to provide the tools. I understood that without proper equipment, technical advancement was impossible. What about the bayonets? I asked. The attachments that allow musketeers to use their weapons as spears. Hector sighed deeply. That is even harder than the barrel, specifically the iron ring mount. He gestured. It must fit securely without falling off, yet not be so tight that it jams or deforms the muzzle during attachment or removal. It requires perfect precision for every single barrel, making mass production extremely difficult. Sensing my potential dissatisfaction with the bad news, Hector quickly pivoted. However, I have made progress on the paper cartridges you suggested. I have a working sample. He retrieved a few small, light brown paper cylinders and handed them to me. I inspected them closely. The uniform packets contain measured gunpowder and a lead ball. Hector explained. Each contains the optimal charge and a standard ball. Soldiers simply bite the end, pour the powder, and ram the paper and ball into the barrel. It eliminates guesswork, speeds up training, and prevents explosions from overcharging or misfires from undercharging. I looked at the simple, yet revolutionary cartridges with approval. This was a significant improvement for efficiency and safety. Excellent work, Hector, I praised, then asked casually, who is responsible for making these? Hector replied without thinking, oh, my apprentices do it when they have free time. It's simple work, weighing and wrapping. My expression darkened as I interrupted. You have your apprentices spending all day on this repetitive, unskilled labor? I hired them to learn the core craft of barrel forging and flintlock assembly to increase production, not to do work that any woman in the territory could handle. My tone was not harsh, but my disappointment caused Hector to break into a cold sweat. Realizing his mistake, Hector stammered, my lord, they aren't ready for the core techniques yet. Are they truly not ready? I stared at him calmly. Or are you unwilling to teach them? Hector was speechless, sweat beading on his forehead. He finally decided to be honest. Lowering his voice, he said with a craftsman's stubborn anxiety, my lord, you don't understand the rules of the trade. If I teach these boys everything, they become my competitors. They are young, fast, and cheap. If they learn my craft, I'll be replaced. I have to protect my livelihood. It's the same for every craftsman in the territory. No one wants to teach their true secrets. I realized this wasn't a technical issue, but a deep-seated guild mentality. It was the classic fear. Teach the apprentice, starve the master. Hector feared that sharing his knowledge would destroy his value and lead to his replacement by cheaper labor. I understood. This was a common phenomenon in the age of manual labor. But understanding did not mean I would tolerate it. Conford needed to increase musket production, and personal technical hoarding could not be allowed to hinder it. The root cause was a lack of security and incentive, leading Hector to guard his knowledge. I looked at the nervous, stubborn old craftsman and made my decision. I would not rely on orders alone, but on a systemic arrangement that tied Hector's personal interests to the territory's success. I said calmly, Hector, you aren't busy, are you? Come with me. I will resolve this so you can teach your apprentices without fear. Confused and anxious, Hector followed me into the castle, a place that symbolized power and authority, for the very first time. Hector felt incredibly uneasy in the solemn Lord's hall, unsure of how to carry himself. I summoned my steward, Edgar, who arrived promptly. I ordered Edgar to gather all registered Level 1 craftsmen from the workshops to the Lord's hall immediately. Sensing the gravity of the situation, Edgar bowed and complied. He hurried off to execute the order. I gestured for the anxious Hector to sit. Hector, fearing punishment, was on the verge of tears. He pleaded for forgiveness, promising to teach his apprentices without reservation. He assumed I was about to make an example of him. I softened my tone, assuring Hector that he wasn't being punished, but that the root of his problem was being addressed. I explained that I would provide a reason for the craftsmen to teach their apprentices wholeheartedly. Hector remained standing, still trembling with uncertainty. Soon, footsteps echoed outside. Edgar returned with 3 key technical pillars of comfort: Martin the mason, Norman the stonemason, and Elliot the carpenter. They looked bewildered, clearly unaware of why they had been summoned to the hall. I invited them to sit, but they hesitated, unsure of the protocol. Edgar arranged their seating, and they sat stiffly, hands on their knees. I addressed them, acknowledging their contributions and stating that I wished to discuss the territory's future. I noted that I had identified a common, unspoken issue regarding apprentice training. I pointedly remarked that the masters were reluctant to pass on their core skills. The atmosphere grew tense as the craftsmen instinctively prepared to deny the claim. They insisted they were dedicated to their apprentices. However, their nervous glances betrayed the truth. It was an unspoken industry rule to protect one's livelihood. I waved off their denials, stating I understood their concerns. I acknowledged the fear that teaching apprentices would render the masters obsolete. The craftsmen fell silent, silently conceding the point. I shifted my tone, emphasizing that Conford needed to rapidly increase production and quality to survive. I declared that the current hoarding of knowledge was unsustainable. The craftsmen braced themselves for a harsh decree. I instead offered a solution to their anxieties. I announced the creation of a new position, Master Craftsman. This role would focus on teaching. Master Craftsmen would be contractually obligated to pass on core skills, with the territory monitoring progress. In return, they would receive superior compensation. I promised a base salary increase of 10 silver coins per apprentice. I noted that eventually, they could earn a living solely through instruction. The craftsmen were stunned by the offer, and I added a second benefit: a permanent pension for every apprentice who successfully graduated. This pension would ensure their security in old age, increasing by 10 silver coins per graduate. The craftsmen were shocked. Their greatest fear, poverty in old age, had been resolved. I asked Edgar if he had recorded everything. Edgar confirmed he had. I ordered him to finalize the decree with the scribe, Maul, for immediate implementation. Edgar agreed. I asked the stunned craftsmen if this solved their concerns. The hall erupted with enthusiastic agreement. They praised my wisdom and vied to be the first to sign up. The craftsmen rose, eager to begin recruiting. Their previous reluctance had vanished, replaced by a desire to find the best apprentices. Hector, overcome with emotion, promised to teach everything he knew, aiming to produce 20 master gunsmiths. I nodded, satisfied. I knew this decree would solve the production bottleneck by incentivizing the transfer of knowledge. While it increased fiscal expenditure, I deemed it a worthy investment. I dismissed them, urging them to prepare for the future of Conford. The craftsmen left, filled with newfound motivation. Hector bowed deeply to me before departing, his eyes full of gratitude. Meanwhile, at the tip of the southwest peninsula, Winter's port lay in ruins. The lighthouse had collapsed, and the docks were reduced to charred, skeletal remains. The once prosperous warehouses and streets were now nothing but ash and rubble. The air still carries the faint, smoky scent of the desperate fire from years ago as I stand here. Once the kingdom's most prosperous northern port, it thrived on trade with the field territory across the sea, as I have learned from the local history. When the kingdom abandoned the northern frontier, I watched as Winter's port was left to rot. As the Solon army approached, I observed the commander, a noble from the Field family, issue a final, brutal order. He burned the city to ash to deny the barbarians its resources, and I witnessed the fire rage for days, razing the port to the ground. Yet, I see that life persisted. On the slopes near the inland valley, a small human settlement emerged from the ruins. The founders were the slaves Baron Cyril had brought to the northern frontier, who had survived a Solon ambush at Icewater Creek, as I have been told. Using salvaged supplies and sheer instinct, I noted how they migrated south, finding this fertile, overlooked corner of the ruined port. Cyril's original territory was located on the tip of the southwest peninsula, a rare, relatively warm, and humid region in the north, which I recognize as a strategic location. The military advisor who chose this site had foresight, though I know he perished at Icewater Creek. The first winter was brutal. I heard that many survivors starved or froze to death. But the survivors, possessing the resilience of the Plantagenet people, endured, as I have observed in their character. They cleared ruins, built huts, farmed, fished, and hunted, and within 6 months, I saw Exile Slope become an orderly, self-sufficient community of hundreds. Baron Cyril, having contributed nothing to the reconstruction, relied on his noble status, a fact I find quite distasteful. He reasserted himself as ruler, moving into the finest stone house the settlers had built, as I witnessed. He remained decadent, wallowing in drink and lust while leaving administration to literate former slaves, as I observed. The settlers, bound by ingrained hierarchy and fear, tolerated him, though I could see resentment festering. I noted that Cyril's hollow good life ended days ago. Thorstein, a Solon vanguard commander routed by Leon's Plantagenet cavalry at Ashbourne, knew returning to Herald after such a defeat meant execution, as I understood the situation. In desperation, he led his 60 remaining cavalrymen south, stumbling upon Exile Slope as I tracked his movements. For Thorstein's broken force, this was a godsend. I saw Cyril's untrained guards slaughtered or forced to surrender instantly. I watched as Cyril was dragged from his bed, shivering and terrified, while the Solon commander seized his mate. Cyril was tossed into a cold storage room, and I could tell he was grateful merely to be alive. Surprisingly, I noted that Thorstein did not massacre the settlers. A pragmatist, he knew he needed these industrious Plantagenet survivors to survive and potentially rise again, as I deduced from his actions. He implemented lighter taxes and labor demands than Cyril, asking only for food and supplies for his troops, which I observed. The settlers found this Solon barbarian kinder than their greedy, cowardly former master, as I heard them whisper. Yet, Thorstein remained obsessed with revenge and returning to his tribe, tracking the Northern War, as I watched him do. When scouts reported Harold besieging Conford, I saw Thorstein grow excited, seeing a chance for redemption. He prepared his troops, watching Conford closely, ready to reinforce his allies at the critical moment to earn forgiveness, as I observed. While enjoying wine and bread in his stolen bedroom, I saw him dream of his comeback. Suddenly, I heard panicked footsteps and shouting erupt outside. Dust-covered, pale scouts burst in, screaming, "We lost! We lost, my lord!" As I watched the scene unfold, Thorstein shoved the mate aside, eyes gleaming with bloodlust. Lost? Excellent. Did we crush those Plantagenet bastards at Conford? Assemble the troops. I heard him command. I watched his words die in his throat. The scouts looked up in pure terror. "No, my lord. We lost. The Sparrow Legion, Ingvar's warband. All finished. Dead everywhere." I heard them report. Thorstein froze, his excitement replaced by a hollow, deathly pallor, as I observed. "What? Say that again," he roared, his voice trembling as I listened. He stared at the shaking scout, praying he had misheard, as I watched him. "It's true, my lord. A total rout at Conford. Ingvar was captured, Unag's cavalry decimated. The Solon banners were cut down." I heard the scout cry. Thorstein was forced to accept the horrific truth, as I witnessed. Not only had his vanguard failed, but the Solon main force, the Sparrow Legion, had been utterly crushed at Conford, as I confirmed. A strange, complex emotion washed over him, and after the shock, I saw a perverse sense of relief emerge. "So, it wasn't just my incompetence," he muttered, his nerves loosening as I overheard. "Even Ingvar and the elite Sparrow Legion fell there. We all severely underestimated that Plantagenet lord and his stone fortress," he added, as I listened. I saw that this realization lightened his psychological burden. His failure seemed less unforgivable now, but I knew the cold reality would soon return. The main force's defeat meant his last hope of redemption was gone, as I realized. Harold would never forgive a deserter after such a catastrophic loss, as I understood. He could never go back. I knew Frostguard and the Solon Alliance were closed to him. He and his 60 men were now traitors and outcasts, and I knew that was just the beginning. Thorstein broke into a cold sweat, looking north toward the fields as I watched him. Harvest was coming. By tradition, after the harvest, I knew the Solon army would raid the Plantagenet borders for winter supplies. Usually, they would swarm the villages around Friend City, as I recalled. But this year was different. The defeat at Conford had shattered the Solon army's strength, as I observed. Harold might be too enraged or weakened to attack Conford again, as I surmised. Yet, the need for loot and grain remained to appease the tribes, as I knew. Where would they target instead? The answer was obvious to me: his southwest peninsula. A relatively wealthy, poorly defended territory rebuilt by Plantagenet survivors, as I noted. If they couldn't take Conford, I knew they would surely crush his small, defenseless peninsula. I knew Harold could easily crush them with a 100-man squad, treating them like ants. I watched as Thorstein realized he faced a grim fate: either lose his supplies or be executed as a traitor. Whether he fought or fled, I saw that he was doomed to die in disgrace. I observed Thorstein fall into despair. I watched him pace in silence, his mind racing through desperate, discarded options. I knew surrender was impossible. Harold would never accept it. I understood that fleeing south or holding his ground were equally futile for him. In his darkest moment, I saw a wild, lightning bolt idea strike him. The thought was so rebellious that I saw him initially recoil from it. Yet, as I watched him weigh his certain death, the idea took root and became tempting. Perhaps he could defect to Conford? I saw the thought make him tremble. To join the Plantagenet lord who had just decimated the Solon army? It was madness, yet I knew it was his only chance for survival. I reasoned that Conford surely needed allies after their costly victory. Isolated in the north, I knew they would value an ally over another enemy. I knew Thorstein could offer his 60 experienced Solon cavalry. I noted that he also controlled 300 industrious Plantagenet laborers. Most importantly, I realized his intelligence on Solon tactics was invaluable to Conford. The risk was immense, but I saw that the reward was a chance at life. His heart pounding, I watched Thorstein decide he had to try. A month later, at the royal hunting ground near Play, I felt the autumn air fill the woods. I watched a luxurious carriage arrive, escorted by royal knights. I saw attendants help the obese King Heinrich XI disembark. He was the monarch of the Plantagenet kingdom. Supported by 2 guards, I watched him struggle to stand. I saw him inhale the fresh air, relieved to be away from palace incense. I watched Queen Katerina von Eisenberg follow, elegant and sharp-eyed. She was in her 30s, radiating noble poise. She was the daughter of Count Eisenberg, a key political figure. I knew her marriage cemented the alliance between the crown and her family. Count Eisenberg controlled a third of the border army, wielding immense power. I watched Prince Sigmund von Heinrich step out last. I heard Katerina smile, promising the king a pleasant hunt. I could see Heinrich was in high spirits. I knew hunting was his favorite pastime because it was easy and rewarding. I watched him scan the woods for prey. I saw him spot a large stag 30 meters away. The stag stood in the clearing, unaware of its fate. Unbeknownst to the king, I knew hunters had spent days preparing this. I knew they had exhausted and corralled the animal to ensure an easy shot. I watched an attendant present a decorated flintlock musket, preloaded. I saw another provide a support stand to bear the weapon's weight. This was necessary, as I knew the king lacked the strength to aim unaided. I heard Heinrich instruct his son to watch his technique. I watched him clumsily aim at the stationary stag. I saw him take a long time to aim while the court held its breath. He fired, and I watched white smoke fill the air. The stag collapsed instantly. I knew a hidden marksman had fired simultaneously to ensure the kill. I heard Heinrich cheer, boasting of his undiminished marksmanship. I watched Katerina applaud, praising his skill with a practiced smile. I heard Sigmund flatter his father, comparing him to elite snipers. I watched the court erupt in sycophantic praise. I saw a messenger arrive and whisper to the scribe. I heard the scribe inform the king that Count Rockefeller's convoy, carrying stolen heads and the captured commander Ingvar, would arrive by noon tomorrow. I saw that Heinrich was ecstatic. I knew he was used to exaggerated reports of great victories from the north. I realized he had become numb to such claims. But this time, I noted that Rockefeller had sent physical proof and a high-ranking prisoner. Convinced of the victory's legitimacy, I watched the king order an immediate return to play. I knew he wanted to see the spoils of this rare, genuine triumph himself. Queen Katerina nodded elegantly, her eyes gleaming with interest. Such a grand event is worthy of His Majesty's inspection. Count Eisenberg will surely be pleased. The royal retinue immediately began preparing for their return. Heinrich, excited as a child expecting a gift, boarded the carriage with the queen. The procession turned toward the capital, Play, leaving the bloody deer carcass behind. 2 days later, I watched as the king returned to his loyal capital, Play. Ignoring rest, Heinrich XI bathed and changed, then rushed to the city gates with his courtiers and guards. I observed that Play was packed with people, buzzing with anticipation. Word had spread. Heroes from the northern frontier were arriving to present hundreds of stolen barbarian heads and captives. The king's procession arrived just as the victory parade from France City passed through the gates. The crowd erupted as the Plantagenet cavalry, led by the Rockefeller Lion Banner and the Plantagenet Royal Flag, marched in. Then came the sight that silenced the crowd before turning into thunderous cheers. Hundreds of elite infantry carried spears, each topped with a lime-preserved, grimacing stolen head. The heads were arranged in expressions of terror, their hollow eyes staring at the land they had failed to conquer. The stench of blood and lime filled the air, evoking a visceral, primitive thrill of victory. Behind the heads, a massive, blood-stained banner was carried upside down. The Stolen Sparrow Legion's eagle emblem hung inverted, mocked and spat upon by the citizens. It was the ultimate symbol of enemy humiliation, followed by a line of miserable captives. Dozens of Solonians, chained like livestock, shuffled forward with numb expressions. Ragged and scarred, their former ferocity had vanished, replaced by despair. High-ranking officers in cages, wearing wooden yokes, dared not meet the crowd's hateful gaze. Most notable was Ingvar, held in the final, reinforced cage. The former battle commander was shirtless, his body covered in whip marks and burn scars. These were the remnants of Count Rockefeller's brutal interrogation in France City. He kept his head bowed, his pride shattered, waiting in silence for his execution. Kill them, hang the savages. The crowd roared, hurling insults and debris at the prisoners. Years of fear and hatred were finally being vented. The parade reached the central Victory Square. Gallows had been erected, casting long shadows in the autumn sun. The prisoners were dragged from their cages to the gallows. Guards placed nooses around their necks. Ingvar offered no resistance, merely staring at the gray sky. Heinrich XI, accompanied by Queen Katerina, Prince Sigmund, and his court, ascended the viewing platform. The king's appearance drew deafening cheers of "Long live the king." Enjoying the adulation, Heinrich stood at the edge of the platform and signaled for silence. He addressed his subjects, his voice amplified by heralds. "My loyal subjects, we gather not for a mere victory, but to witness a great truth. The Plantagenet kingdom's majesty brooks no provocation. The Solonians' greed and barbarism have sealed their doom." He gestured to the heads and captives. "Behold the fate of those who dare invade our northern frontier. Their heads shall decorate our walls. Their failure cements our glory. This victory belongs to the northern defenders, Count Rockefeller, and every loyal Plantagenet citizen. I declare that any enemy challenging our authority shall be crushed like these barbarians. Long live the kingdom. Long live Plantagenet. Long live my people." Though hollow, the king's speech successfully incited the crowd. The square erupted in deafening cheers. Satisfied, Heinrich gave the final order. "In my name, and in the name of the innocent dead, execute these invaders." The executioner signaled, and the gallows were triggered. Snap! The sound of breaking necks echoed through the square. The bodies of the Solonians twitched and then hung limp. All captives, including Ingvar, were executed before the cheering masses. The inverted eagle flag was taken to the cathedral. After a purification rite, it was hung permanently on the exterior wall as a warning and a monument to victory. Heinrich watched the hanging corpses and the inverted flag, his face beaming with satisfaction. He felt like an invincible monarch, his authority reinforced by the bloody display. Official dispatches were soon dispatched across the kingdom. The headline read, "Great victory in the north. The main Solon force was crushed at Confort." The text detailed the heroic victory of the kingdom's army. It commended 5 commanders for their meritorious service. They were Sir Calin, Sir Laurent, Leon, Charlotte, and the Lord of Confort, myself, Karl von Schmidt. My name appeared as a hero for the first time, catching the attention of the kingdom's elite. In Franklin, the Schmidt castle remained a place of luxury and ease. Morning sunlight filtered through stained glass onto the plush carpets. Duke Schmidt awoke in the arms of his mistress. Served by his attendants, he dressed in velvet robes and entered his study to attend to family affairs. My mahogany desk was piled with documents. I picked up the top one, my brow furrowing in immediate displeasure. It was a crudely printed Kingdom Gazette. "Hans," I barked at my old servant. "I told you not to bring me this courtly drivel meant to fool the commoners with exaggerated nonsense." Hans bowed nervously. "My apologies, Duke. Steward Sebastian insisted you would find today's issue interesting." I raised an eyebrow. Sebastian was too pragmatic to waste my time. I waved Hans away. "Very well." I examined the Gazette, my eyes landing on the bold headline, "Great Victory in the Northern Frontier. Solonians crushed at Confort." I read with growing curiosity. The article used flowery prose to describe how the fearless kingdom army, led by the young military genius Karl von Schmidt, had triumphed. It claimed they had defended Confort against overwhelming odds, dealing a crushing blow to the Solonians in a milestone victory. While mentioning Sir Laurent and Calin, the article heaped the titles Guardian of the North and Rising Star of the Kingdom onto me. I was painted as the kingdom's primary hero against the barbarians. I did not look pleased. I looked perplexed. Light of the North? A military genius. I chuckled, shaking my head at the court's sycophancy. I already possessed Edgar's detailed, objective reports on the battle. I knew it was a Pyrrhic victory. I had lost half my men. The Rochefort reinforcements were negligible, and the Solonian main force remained a looming threat. However, my expression shifted to one of cold calculation. This reputation comes at a convenient time. Edgar's report contained another vital detail. I and Charlotte Rochefort, the daughter of Count Rochefort, appeared to be romantically involved. I was unaware that my formal marriage proposal had been shelved. Rochefort's daughter. I mused, my eyes brightening. Count Rochefort, governor of the North, was one of the few powerful, independent lords in the realm. A marriage alliance with the Rochefort family would be transformative for the Schmidt family. It would extend our influence from the fertile plains into the strategically vital northern frontier. This alliance could solidify our power and potentially allow us to rival the Eisenberg family, who led the Queen's faction. The Eisenbergs, backed by Queen Katerina and control of Blackstone Pass, had become dangerously arrogant. I had long been wary of their rise. If my mediocre son could marry the Count's daughter, it would be a masterstroke. I had not expected such a political windfall from Karl. I must reevaluate my son, I thought. If he secures this marriage, the family will support him fully. Meanwhile, in a small stone house near Franklin Castle, Lady Irene, my mother, clutched a copy of the Kingdom Gazette. Her hands trembled as she greedily read the praise heaped upon her son. Sunlight illuminated her face, her eyes welling with tears of joy. "My Karl," she whispered, choked with emotion. The titles Light of the North and Military Genius clashed with her memory of the quiet, melancholic boy she had raised. She remembered me as a child who smiled at butterflies, protected from the family's cold indifference. Now, I was a commander fighting barbarians, and her pride was overwhelming. Yet, fear followed. She knew the reality behind the glory. The papers ignored the bloodshed. Edgar's brief letters hinted at the harsh, dangerous conditions of the North. A great victory, but the Solonians won't rest, she worried, her knuckles white. Next time, they will return with more force. Can he survive with so few men? Her joy vanished, replaced by maternal dread. She felt the dark clouds of war gathering on the northern horizon. She set the paper down, clasped her hands, and prayed. She prayed for my safety, hoping this victory wouldn't be the prelude to a tragedy. At Blackstone Pass, Igna's fortress. Igna's, meaning eaglenest, was a fortress perched on the mountains, serving as a raptor's nest overlooking the land. It was the cornerstone of the kingdom's northern defense, guarding the primary route to the northern wastes. Blackstone Pass was not a single path, but a complex network of mountains and valleys. There were hundreds of potential routes through the region. Eaglenist could only control the main supply lines. Count Eisenberg struggled to defend the countless hidden trails. Even on main routes, Eaglenist served more as a deterrent than a total blockade. With walls and cannons, it could stop infantry and harass supply lines. But against the highly mobile Solon cavalry, the fortress was often ineffective. The light cavalry could easily bypass the fortress to raid the interior. Consequently, commanders had invested heavily in their own elite cavalry. The Blackstone Cavalry and the Rockefort's Franz City Cavalry were known as the Northern Iron Cavalry. They were the kingdom's expensive, elite response to the Solonians. Yet, Count Eisenberg rarely committed them to open field battles against the Solonian main force. This was due, in part, to the Count's deep-seated fear. The Battle of Grey Wolf Forest 7 years ago remains the most catastrophic defeat in the northern frontier's history. King Heinrich X led 80,000 troops to crush the Solon tribes, only to be ambushed and annihilated by the Solon General Harold in the Grey Wolf Forest. With high-ranking generals killed or surrendered, Heinrich X died of sheer rage and humiliation. Count Eisenberg, leading a flank, narrowly escaped the slaughter and retreated with the remnants of his forces. This nightmare shattered his courage and offensive spirit. He developed an instinctive fear of the Solon army, particularly their cavalry. Whenever Solon forces moved south, he retreated into the Eagle's Nest fortress, relying on passive defense. His muskets and arrows did little to stop the massive Solon army. He no longer dared to face the Solon cavalry in open field combat. Furthermore, his inaction was driven by political calculation and family interests. Count Eisenberg viewed his elite, expensive cavalry as his private foundation. He saw them as essential leverage to maintain his status against rivals like the Schmidt and Rockefort families. He refused to risk his family's influence by suffering heavy losses in a national interest battle against the Solonians. This was unacceptable to him. Thus, he preferred the stigma of being cowardly to preserve his cavalry as his ultimate tool for power. The Guardian of the North sat in his study atop the Eagle's Nest, overlooking the pass. The atmosphere was oppressive. He held the Kingdom Gazette sent from the capital, place. He stared grimly at the headline regarding the Battle of Carnford. Footsteps approached. Friedrich von Schmidt, a handsome young officer, entered and saluted. "Count, you summoned me?" Friedrich, the Duke's eldest son, had been sent by the king to serve under the Count and learn frontier defense. Without turning, the Count slid the paper over. "Look, Friedrich, your brother in the north has achieved quite a feat." Friedrich read the report. Seeing the praise for me, he was surprised but quickly composed himself. His memories of me, his half-brother, were vague. I had been a timid, introverted boy who clung to the neglected Lady Irene. Disinterested in martial arts or magic, I was an outcast in the warrior-focused Schmidt family. I was eventually sent to the north to handle the king's doomed pioneering decree. Friedrich never imagined this forgotten, fragile boy would survive, let alone cause such a stir. Defeating Solon forces? Praised by the king? Light of the North? It was unbelievable. He felt a mix of surprise, faint family pride, and intense scrutiny. "Truly surprising, Count," Friedrich said carefully. "I recall Karl having no interest in military matters. It is unexpected." He felt a newfound, genuine interest in his stranger of a brother. He wondered what transformed the timid boy into a hero, and how much of the report was true. The Count turned, studying Friedrich's face. "Indeed, we underestimated him. Rockefort has gained quite a reputation from this. The North is changing, Friedrich. Keep an eye on your brother. You may cross paths eventually." Friedrich bowed. "I will, Count." He felt a surge of curiosity and a subtle, rising sense of rivalry. Below Conford Mountain, the workshop district was bustling with life. The sounds of hammers and bellows filled the air. It was a far cry from the days when only Hector worked. Under my master craftsman policy, Hector had abandoned his secrecy and was teaching his apprentices fully. Hector paced behind a row of apprentices. His expression was stern, but his eyes held the focus of a true mentor. Stop. Your wrists. Steady. Use your waist. You're making the iron brittle. Do it again. He demonstrated the proper rhythm himself. The apprentice nodded, adjusted his stance, and resumed with focus. Nearby, others polished the interior of a musket barrel. Hector frowned, touching the surface. Rough, like sandpaper. If this jams on the battlefield, the soldier dies. Focus. Patience. Feel the imperfections. Don't just file blindly. The apprentices listened intently, without complaint. They knew Hector's harshness meant he was finally teaching them real skills. My production reforms were also yielding results. Previously, one craftsman did everything, which was inefficient. Now, I divided the work. One group forged the barrels. A skilled group, under Hector, handled the core task of rifling and polishing. Others made triggers and stocks. A final team handled assembly. This assembly line approach increased efficiency and lowered the skill barrier for individual apprentices. Core techniques remained with Hector and his trusted inner circle, protecting his technical advantage. Becoming a formal apprentice with pension benefits had become highly competitive. It required talent, dedication, and often a significant tuition from the apprentice's family. After all, even mastering one step guaranteed a lucrative future. Hector's status had changed forever. Hector, once a skilled but antisocial and alcoholic recluse, was shunned by the serfs. Now, he is one of Conford's most respected and sought-after figures. People invite him to every celebration, hoping to apprentice their children to him. They greet him respectfully as Master Hector. Even single mothers eye him as a potential provider. I arrived at the workshop district for an inspection. Unaware of my reputation as the light of the North in the capital, I focused solely on local development. Hector greeted me with genuine respect. My lord, you look like a new man, Hector. I noted, satisfied with the busy workshop. Thanks to you, my lord. I've signed 30 apprentices organized into specialized teams. We expect to produce about 15 flintlock muskets and a few matchlock muskets this month, around 20 total. While far from mass production, this was a massive leap from previous output. Well done. What is your biggest challenge? I asked. Hector pointed to the apprentices drilling barrels, boring, and polishing. It requires immense patience and precision. It's slow, tedious work, and the defect rate remains high. I nodded thoughtfully. I understand. I haven't forgotten your ideas for water-powered boring machines. I'm working on a solution. Hector's eyes lit up with anticipation. I shifted to a casual tone. How is life? I hear you're quite popular now. Hector blushed, looking shy. It's much better. People invite me for drinks, and they treat me with respect. His simple words revealed his deep satisfaction at being accepted. I lowered my voice. I hear it's more than just drinks. Many single mothers are interested. Have you considered settling down? Hector turned bright red, caught off guard. He waved his hands. My lord, don't tease me. I have too many flaws. My drinking drove my last wife away. I'm used to being alone. What about children? I asked directly. Don't you want an heir to pass your skills to? The question struck a chord, leaving Hector speechless. Apprentices were outsiders. They were just for security. But a son, that was a primal, blood-deep desire. I saw the realization in Hector's eyes. I patted the smith's shoulder. Think about it. If you find the right person, don't let the chance slip. I'll preside over the wedding myself. Hector nodded fervently, his eyes shining with gratitude. Meanwhile, Maul was overseeing a massive construction project at the foot of the Conford Fortress. I had ordered the 500 new militia members to join the wall construction. Though labeled militia from France City, I treated them as full-time, professional combat soldiers. I believed an elite army must be capable of both combat and engineering. Like the Roman legions, they needed the ability to build fortifications rapidly. This was vital in the northern frontier, where enemy cavalry roamed. Despite having 50 experienced cavalrymen from Lyon, they were no match for the Solonian hordes. I knew Conford's defense had to rely on fortifications and range firepower. This project was the perfect training for my new army. These former farmers and miners were already adept at digging and hauling stone. Under Maul's guidance, they integrated quickly into the construction effort. Maul surveyed the terrain, planning the wall to connect existing ruins and natural obstacles. A white line marked the path of the future wall, snaking across the landscape. Work began with digging foundations, 0.5 meter to 1 meter deep. Soldiers and laborers excavated the trenches. Craftsmen then laid heavy stones to form a solid base. Smaller stones were used to fill gaps, ensuring maximum stability. Once the foundation was set, the finer work began. Wooden molds were erected on both sides of the foundation. These molds were reinforced with heavy stakes and stones to withstand the pressure of the rammed earth. Then came the most critical step, ramming the earth. Laborers brought damp soil, carefully measured for moisture, into the molds. A team of strong workers used heavy wooden or stone rammers, chanting in unison as they struck the earth. The heavy thuds echoed as the soil was compressed into a dense, solid mass. This repetitive, labor-intensive process was the secret to the wall's durability. The wall rose steadily, accompanied by the rhythm of the work chants. A low, solid yellow wall began to take shape. To speed up progress, I drafted another 500 serfs. Seeing nearly 1,000 people working, I felt both excited and pressured. I hoped to finish the main wall before the next Selonian attack. I summoned Edgar, intending to draft more laborers and pause non-essential production. However, Edgar, usually obedient, stopped me. "My lord, I understand your urgency," Edgar said firmly, "but it is late summer. The rye and peas are ripening. We must harvest them within 10 days. He pointed to the golden fields. The harvest is the foundation of our survival. It must be our absolute priority. If we miss the harvest window due to a lack of hands, the crops will rot. Even with the strongest walls, we will starve in winter. What use will the walls be then?" Edgar insisted that at least 600 able-bodied laborers must remain for the harvest to ensure survival, calling it the absolute bottom line. I calmed down instantly upon hearing this. I looked at the vast fields essential for the survival of thousands in Conford, then at the construction sites, feeling the heavy weight of my responsibilities. I took a deep breath, forcing my restless mind to settle. Edgar was right. Survival was paramount. Without food, even the finest army would collapse. "I understand," I said, my voice steady. I asked for the exact number of people currently supported by the territory, excluding the 500 militia. Edgar reported that there were approximately 1,700 permanent residents requiring full rations, including the standing army, craftsmen, officials, and their families. He noted that 500 of these were refugees who had arrived in the last 6 months. These newcomers included northern frontier survivors, peasants fleeing heavy taxes, and bankrupt artisans from France City. I was disappointed, having expected more people after our recent victory to support the plans Mr. Moore and I had devised. Edgar explained that while the victory was significant, the northern frontier was largely depopulated. Survivors were scattered and isolated, many unaware that Conford had been rebuilt or that the battle had been won. News traveled slowly, and it took immense courage for people to leave their homes for an unknown destination. I sighed and agreed to halt recruitment to prioritize the harvest, acknowledging that construction would have to slow down. Edgar bowed and left to coordinate the labor. I stood between the ripening fields and the half-finished walls. With 2,200 people total, I still felt critically short-handed. I needed at least 3,000. Just then, a scout returned with unexpected news. 2 unarmed Selonians carrying a white flag had arrived, claiming to be from Thorstein's cavalry and seeking an alliance. I was stunned by the mention of Thorstein. I recalled the name well. Thorstein was the battle commander of the Sword Legion, whom Charlotte and I had ambushed at Icewater Creek. Later, as commander of the Solon Vanguard, Thorstein had been crushed by Leon's cavalry. I had assumed he was either dead or had fled back to Frostgard. I realized why Thorstein hadn't returned. Under Harold's harsh military law, returning after such a disastrous defeat would mean certain death. It was logical that he would not dare return. Yet, the idea of this defeated enemy seeking an alliance was either madness or a desperate gamble. The news sparked an idea in me. I knew the quality of Thorstein's cavalry. They were elite soldiers. I desperately needed organized, disciplined labor. Even if I disarmed them, they could be used for construction and harvesting, solving my immediate crisis. The risk was high, especially regarding public perception. Many of my subjects were northern frontier survivors who harbored deep hatred for the Solonians. Accepting a Solon army would surely cause massive controversy. Still, it was an opportunity worth investigating. I ordered them to be brought to the mountain pass and set out with a guard. At the outpost, I met the 2 Solon envoys. They were unarmed, their horses exhausted, and one held a makeshift white flag. They looked haggard and nervous, but maintained a soldier's dignity. They were accompanied by a trembling local peasant acting as a translator. Conford guards kept their spears leveled at them. I approached, calmly observing the intruders. Recognizing me as the leader, the Solonians spoke to the translator. The translator stammered, asking if I was the Lord of Conford. I am, I replied. The Solonians seemed relieved, yet remained tense. They spoke again at length. The translator reported that they were sent by Commander Thorstein, who was currently occupying the territory of a noble named Cyril on the southwest peninsula. They wanted an alliance to face future threats. I was amused. Thorstein had seized the stronghold of the incompetent Cyril. This saved me the trouble of dealing with a potential rival later. I kept my composure and asked why they would seek help from an enemy they had fought so recently. The translator relayed the question, and the Solonians looked desperate. They explained that they could not return to Harold, who would surely execute them for their failure. They were now outcasts. They heard Harold was gathering a massive army to head south, and they knew they couldn't defend their current position. They believed only the walls of Conford could withstand the Solon army, and they were seeking a chance to survive by allying with me. I listened quietly, weighing my options. Thorstein was right. The southwest peninsula was indefensible, making Conford our only hope. Their approach was a desperate survival tactic, meaning they would likely be willing to compromise. I needed their strength, but had to maintain absolute control. I looked at the Solon envoys with sharp authority. Alliance? Neither you nor your commander, Thorstein, are qualified to negotiate with me. The Solonians turned pale. Tell Thorstein, I stated. If he wants a way out, he must come to Conford himself in 3 days. I will wait, but not a moment longer. The interpreter relayed the message. The envoys looked fearful at the prospect of their commander entering enemy territory. Seeing my unwavering stance, they nodded in resignation. I signaled the sentries to clear the way. The Solon cavalryman and the middle-aged man departed quickly, burdened by their mission. I watched them go, my gaze deep. This was a risky gamble, but one that could significantly bolster Conford's strength. Now, it depended on whether Thorstein had the courage and sincerity to follow through. Returning to the castle, I encountered a transport team from France City. Edgar was counting supplies in the courtyard and approached me with a smile, handing me a copy of the Kingdom Gazette. My lord, look at this. Count Rochefort sent it. Your heroic deeds are known throughout the kingdom. You are now the light of the north and a hero of the kingdom. I took the ink-smelling paper. The front page featured a flamboyant, exaggerated headline. It painted me as a young god of war who single-handedly crushed the Solon invasion, praising the outstanding scion of the Schmidt family. I found it amusing. I knew the kingdom's propaganda machine well. They excelled at deifying commanders to mask internal weakness. It was a tactic to boost morale and distract the populace. The hero would soon be given impossible tasks and eventually discarded as a sacrificial lamb. Light of the North? Hero of the kingdom? I laughed and handed the paper back. Just stories. Unless Count Rochefort sends real soldiers and grain, or my father sends gold, these are just empty checks from court poets. However, I added, these titles aren't entirely useless. They put Conford on the map. Poor laborers and serfs in the interior now know there is a place in the north where they might find a way to survive. My pragmatic tone earned a look of respect from Edgar. It was rare for a lord so young to remain so clear-headed amidst such praise. Once the supplies are handled, gather all officials in the Lord's Hall, I ordered. We have serious matters to discuss. Yes, my lord. Edgar bowed. Soon, core officials, Maul, Brendan, Richter, Leon, Roland, Edgar, and Hans gathered. I stood at the head of the table, cutting straight to the point. I have news. Thorstein, the commander of the Solon vanguard defeated at Ashbourne, has occupied the tip of the southwest peninsula instead of retreating to Frostgard. The northern officials frowned at the mention of Thorstein. Just now, I dropped the bombshell. Thorstein sent envoys. They are now considered traitors by the Solon tribes and are seeking an alliance with us for protection. It is effectively a surrender. They seek our asylum. The room fell into stunned silence before erupting into debate. The southern officials, like Brendan, Roland, and Edgar, weighed the strategic benefits. Brendan spoke cautiously. My lord, if this is a genuine surrender, it could be considered. Thorstein's cavalry would greatly strengthen our forces. However, security must be paramount. We must ensure their loyalty and maintain strict control. Edgar agreed. We are short on manpower for construction and training. If we disarm them and put them to labor, it solves our immediate needs. Conversely, the northern officials, Richter, Maul, and especially Leon, were furious. Alliance with those butchers? Impossible. Leon stood, trembling with rage. Do you forget how they slaughtered our people and burned our homes? My family's castle fell to them. My father died because of them. I will never side with Solon barbarians. I will kill them on sight. His hatred was bone deep. Maul clenched his fists, his eyes filled with pain. My lord, the old Conford was destroyed by them. My friends died by their blades. These barbarians are bloodthirsty and treacherous. Accepting them is inviting a wolf into the fold. Richter added grimly. My lord, Solonians are cunning. This surrender is likely a stalling tactic or a ruse to scout our weaknesses. Even if they are desperate, their wild nature will cause trouble. Accepting them will alienate our own soldiers. The atmosphere in the hall grew tense. I listened, deeply understanding the pain and hatred of Leon and Maul. Once the room quieted, I spoke with firm resolve. I understand your pain and the hatred you carry. I looked at Leon and Maul with reassurance. I have not forgotten the harm they caused, nor will I blindly trust their sincerity. However, we face a greater threat. Harold's main force is coming to retaliate. Conford is weak, and we need every opportunity to grow stronger. Thorstein's group are desperate strays begging for survival, not charity, I declared firmly. We hold all the cards. They aren't allies, they are surrendering. We must impose harsh terms, total disarmament, strict surveillance, and their leaders must serve as hostages. Their fate is entirely in our hands. I scanned the room. We decide if they become laborers for our walls, cannon fodder against our foes, or assets to be assimilated. The choice is ours, which is far better than leaving them to roam or be used by our enemies. I know this is difficult, I said, my tone softening. But as leaders, we must make rational choices for our survival. To ensure Conford's survival and defeat the Solonians, we must utilize every available resource, even our former enemies. I guarantee, I vowed, we will maintain absolute control. Any Solonian defector who steps out of line will be executed. We will not repeat past tragedies. My explanation calmed the dissent. Brendan and Edgar nodded in support. Leon, Maul, and Richter remained grim and tight-lipped, though they ceased their vocal opposition. They understood the logic, but their emotional scars remained raw. I recognized their lingering resentment. I sighed, resolving to speak with them individually to resolve their internal conflicts. Internal unity was vital for the coming storm. Agreed, I concluded. Edgar, draft harsh surrender terms. Brendan, prepare a foolproof surveillance plan. Everyone else, stay vigilant. Yes, my lord. They replied, though the atmosphere remained heavy as night fell. Silence descended upon Conford, broken only by patrols and distant barking. The subjects and soldiers slept, gathering strength for the morrow. In a stone house, a dim light flickered as voices whispered. Otto the veteran and his wife, Marissa, lay in a rare moment of intimacy. Marissa was heavily pregnant. Otto gently caressed her belly, feeling the child move. Giving you trouble today? Otto asked softly. Marissa smiled, leaning into his arm. He was very active while I helped Mr. Edgar in the warehouse, as if he wanted to help too. She guided his hand to feel the baby's kick. Otto beamed. A strong lad. He'll be a fine warrior. Marissa tapped him playfully. Only a warrior? I just want him to grow up safe, not living on the edge like his father. She worried about the rumors of a Solonian return. Otto held her tighter. The Lord is making this place safe. Once the walls are finished, things will improve. I'll teach him to farm or learn a trade from Master Hector, and he'll live in peace. Their shadows danced on the stone wall, a picture of warmth. This small house and their rebuilding home were everything they fought to protect. Meanwhile, the Lord's hall remained lit. I was still awake. I knew Leon, Maul, and Richter were still conflicted. If their resentment wasn't addressed, it would lead to internal strife. I sat with the three men, the lamp illuminating their stern faces. I know today's decision was hard. I began, my voice understanding. I know your hatred for the Solonians. Leon, your lands fell. Maul, you were enslaved. Richter, you've seen your comrades slaughtered. I carry those debts with you. The three men remained silent, their pain evident. But, I continued, my tone sharpening. Is our goal merely to kill a few Solonians for revenge? No, I pointed to the map. Our goal is to drive them from the northern frontier, reclaim our homes, and ensure our descendants live free from barbarian threats. I looked at Leon. Isn't that why you fight? To reclaim the house of Hawk's glory. To Richter, don't you want to secure land of your own? To Maul, don't you want to build an impregnable home? The men were moved. These were their true desires. To achieve this, I said, we need more than our current strength. We are a ship in a storm. We need ballast, even if it comes from the rocks that damaged us. We must unite all possible forces. Make more friends, fewer enemies. Thorstein and his men are desperate. We take them in to use them. Use their strength, their labor, and their knowledge of the enemy. Assimilate them, or they become our next threat. This isn't compromise or forgetting our hate, I insisted. It is a smarter strategy for a more complete victory. I need you to set aside your grievances for the sake of Confort. Silence filled the hall, save for the crackling lamp. Leon finally looked up. You are right, my lord. I was blinded by hate. I will accept them, but I will watch them closely. If they falter, I will take their heads. Maul nodded, his voice raspy. To prevent another tragedy, I will comply. I will ensure they are properly positioned in my designs. Richter slammed his fist on the table. Fine. If it helps crush those Solonian bastards, I'll endure it. But I'm overseeing their discipline. I want to see what these barbarians are really worth. I felt relieved as the three finally accepted the difficult decision. I knew this was only the beginning, but the core team had reached a unified stance. Excellent. I smiled. Thank you for your understanding. We will discuss the surrender and reorganization details tomorrow to ensure everything is flawless. 6 days later, the appointed day arrived. A sentry reported to me. My lord, they are here. About 10 of them. Their leader, Thorstein, requests an audience. I nodded calmly. I told Brendan, Leon, and Richter, wait here. I will meet this guest. I took a squad of elite guards to the meeting point outside the pass, where 10 Solon cavalry waited. They carried weapons, but kept them in positions that made them difficult to draw quickly. They acted relaxed, laughing and ignoring the Conford sentries pointing spears at them. I understood. It was a typical surrender tactic, feigning an equal negotiation to gain psychological leverage. Essentially, it was just a more dignified way of surrendering. I walked straight up to them. The Solonians finally stopped talking, stood up slowly, and stared at me. I scanned them, locking eyes with a burly, bearded middle-aged officer who looked exhausted yet defiant. It was Thorstein. I didn't acknowledge him immediately, instead stating clearly, I am Lord Karl von Schmidt of Conford. Who is Thorstein? Step forward. The bearded officer stepped forward, puffing out his chest to maintain his dignity. He spoke in broken Plantagenet mixed with Solon. I am Thorstein, commander of the Sword Legion's Vanguard Battalion. His voice was hoarse. His face showed the toll of exile. I cut straight to the point. Commander Thorstein, since you are here, let us discuss the terms of your unit's surrender. Thorstein's face darkened with irritation. He raised his voice. You are mistaken. We are here to form an alliance against Harold. We still have 300 elite cavalry and 300 Plantagenet slaves. We have bargaining power. I sneered. An alliance? I can choose not to ally with you. You can keep your dignity and strength and stay on Cyril's pathetic land. Then, wait for Harold's army to crush you and your 300 cavalry into dust. How does that sound? My cold words exposed Thorstein's deepest fear. The commander's anger vanished, replaced by visible despair. I was right. They were desperate, and the alliance was merely a ploy for better terms. Seeing their spirit broken, I softened my tone but maintained control. However, I am open to accepting your surrender. I am the son of a duke from the Schmidt family. I value noble traditions and have no blood feud with your people. This was a calculated mix of truth and diplomacy, offering them a face-saving exit. Since you have chosen the wise path, I will accept your surrender as I would a fallen but respectable minor noble. Here are the terms. A scribe handed a parchment drafted by Edgar to Thorstein's translator. The translator read aloud. Terms of surrender. First, surrender all weapons, horses, armor, shields, and symbols of the Solon tribe or Sparrow Legion immediately. Personal items like clothing and coins may be kept. Military equipment will be registered and stored by Conford, to be reissued only upon approval. Second, abandon all original titles and hierarchies. You will be reorganized as the Conford 1st Foreign Legion Company, swearing direct allegiance to Lord Karl von Schmidt. Third, the unit will be broken up into squads of 10 and platoons of 30. All junior officers will be appointed by Conford. Fourth, upon entering Conford's defensive perimeter, all movement requires approval through the chain of command up to the Conford command. Thorstein and his officers looked grim. These terms meant total disarmament. The translator continued. In return, Conford offers the following. First, provide housing, food, and water at the same standard as Conford subjects. Second, those who contribute to Conford may be granted honorary citizen of Conford status, enjoying equal rights, with opportunities to join the standing army, receive rewards, or land. Third, you will be under the protection of Conford law and the Lord, ensuring your personal safety. Silence followed. Thorstein clenched his fists. The terms were harsh, stripping them of autonomy. Yet, the promises of survival and future status were a glimmer of hope. I waited patiently, knowing this was a psychological game. Thorstein remained silent, weighing the humiliation against the hope of survival. I stood still, watching impatiently. The mountain wind blew, and the atmosphere remained heavy. Finally, Thorstein took a deep breath. He looked at me and said hoarsely, "My lord, before I decide, I have one request. I want to see Conford with my own eyes. I must ensure this is a place worth entrusting my soldiers' lives to." I smiled, having expected this. I gestured, "Of course. Seeing is believing. Follow me." A Solon soldier whispered nervously, "Commander, be careful of a trap." Thorstein shook his head, glancing at me and my disciplined guards. If he wanted us dead, he would have surrounded us already. "Let's go." He recognized my sincerity in accepting the surrender, coupled with an undeniable, imposing strength. Accompanied by me and my guards, Thorstein entered the territory of Conford for the first time. Before crossing the outer wall, his gaze was drawn to the majestic stone castle on the hillside. The Plantagenet royal flag and the Schmidt family banner flew atop the towers, appearing formidable under the autumn sun. The castle radiated power. Below, a massive construction site hummed with activity as over 1,000 workers laid foundations and moved stone. The sounds of labor, chants, hammering, and rolling wheels filled the air with vitality. The workers were strong, efficient, and highly organized. Thorstein realized these were no mere laborers. They were soldiers in the making. This hidden military potential chilled him. Inside the partially completed walls, the scene was even more shocking. Instead of the expected border town squalor, he found a vibrant, orderly community. Neat stone houses lined clean, tidy streets. In the artisan district, furnaces roared as craftsmen worked with focused intensity. Further out, golden wheat fields and lush pea vines stretched across the landscape. The subjects looked busy and fulfilled, showing little fear of war, only hope for their home. This was a stark contrast to the chaotic Solon tribes and the dilapidated outpost held by Cyril. It displayed immense organizational capability and thriving life. Suddenly, The rhythmic thud of hooves echoed down the street. 50 armored cavalrymen, armed with lances and sabers, rode in a disciplined, steel-like formation. Sunlight glinted coldly off their gear. Leading them was Leon von Hoek, commanding a unit composed of northern frontier survivors who harbored a blood feud against the Solonians. Seeing Thorstein, their eyes burned with raw, murderous hatred, sending a chill down his spine. Were it not for my presence and strict orders, Thorstein had no doubt these knights would have torn him apart. He stared at Leon. He recognized the man from Ashbourne, the Plantagenet cavalry commander who, despite a gut wound, had rallied his men for a second, suicidal charge. The image of Leon, hair disheveled, face smeared with blood, wielding a broken lance like a war god, remained seared into Thorstein's memory. Leon's cold, oppressive glare felt more threatening than any words. Any lingering hope or hesitation in Thorstein vanished. He realized this was a calculated display by me, a demonstration of Conford's prosperity, organization, and a battle-hardened force that despised him. Resistance was futile, posturing was laughable. He could either accept the harsh surrender terms for protection or return to his remnants to be crushed by Harold or these very men. The choice was clear. Turning to me, he shed his remaining pride and hesitation. Bowing deeply, he spoke with a dry, clear voice. Lord Karl von Schmidt, I, Thorstein, former Vanguard Battalion Commander of the Solon Sword Legion, accept your terms on behalf of my men. We surrender. He looked up, pleading, I hope you will honor your word. I smiled, my control absolute. I swear by the honor of the Schmidt family. If you remain loyal, I will honor our agreement and provide for you. Welcome to Conford, Captain Thorstein. The title, Captain, signaled the permanent shift in their fates. Thorstein remained in Conford as a hostage and liaison for the upcoming reorganization. His men took his saber as a token to the camp in the southwest peninsula to relay the surrender orders. Before they left, I leaned in, whispering, Commander Thorstein, one small favor for your men on their way. Thorstein blinked, responding respectfully, My lord. I lowered my voice. Have them dispose of Cyril von Eichberg. Make it clean. Leave no trace of our involvement. Thorstein's pupils constricted in shock. He hadn't expected me to order the execution of a fellow noble. I walked away without explanation, leaving Thorstein reeling. He realized the internal politics of the Plantagenet nobles were just as ruthless as the Solon tribal feuds. Lord Karl was not the gentle man he appeared. He was decisive and ruthless when necessary. Suppressing his shock, Thorstein signaled his most trusted subordinate and issued the secret order in the Solon language, emphasizing a clean execution. The subordinate nodded coldly and rode off to join the others. To me, Cyril was a useless, broken man. I wasn't bloodthirsty, but I knew Cyril, a small-minded, incompetent noble filled with resentment, was a toxic liability. Saving him would yield no gratitude. Using him would only lead to betrayal. Killing him directly, however, would stain my own reputation as a noble. It was better to use the Solonians to eliminate this nuisance. It was clean, and I avoided the stigma of harming a peer. Let's go, Thorstein, I said. Our people are waiting in the Lord's Hall. Time to get acquainted. Thorstein followed me toward the castle, his heart heavy. As they passed Leon's unit, the cavalry parted in silence. Thorstein felt the biting hatred in every gaze directed at him. Every step felt like walking on blades. His back was soaked in cold sweat. They crossed the drawbridge and the inner gate, reaching the main hall. The heavy oak doors groaned open. Thorstein followed me into the solemn Lord's Hall, where the core officials were gathered. Brendan, Richter, Roland, Edgar, Maul, Miller, and Creek were all present. As they entered, everyone rose, their eyes locking onto the stranger from Solon. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy as the group regarded Thorstein with a mix of scrutiny, coldness, and curiosity. I gestured to the empty seat at the end of the table. Sit there, behind Mr. Hans. Hans, the scribe, managed the territory's finances and supplies. Thorstein complied, standing stiffly and feeling completely out of place. Sit, I commanded. The others obeyed, though their gazes remained fixed on the newcomer. Gentlemen, I began. Commander Thorstein and his troops have agreed to surrender to Conford. Their main force arrives shortly. I turned to Old Moore. Prepare a temporary area for at least 500 people. It must provide shelter and ensure food and water rations are ready as promised. Moore nodded, recording the instructions. Understood. I will designate an isolation zone in the southwest corner, near water but away from the main workshops and granaries. Leon strode into the hall, still in his armor. His metal boots clattered against the stone floor. He saluted me, cast a cold glare at Thorstein, and took his seat below Brendan. Thorstein shrank back, unable to meet Leon's eyes. I continued, Edgar, oversee the surrender ceremony. Keep it brief but formal and serious so everyone understands its significance. Understood, my lord. I will draft a dignified and efficient procedure. Thorstein felt a flicker of relief. A surrender ceremony was better than he had feared. My directness and efficiency were more reassuring than empty pleasantries. I then turned to my officers. Brendan, Richter, Roland, Miller, Creek. Present, they replied. Select 10 capable, loyal, and respected non-commissioned officers or recruits from your units immediately. For what purpose, my lord? Brendan asked. They will serve as leaders for the new 1st Foreign Legion Company. I need to ensure this unit remains under our control. They will report directly to Richter for integration and monitoring. Yes, my lord. The officers replied, understanding the necessity of controlling the surrendered troops. I looked at Thorstein. Once your troops arrive, assist Edgar in handing over weapons and horses, then coordinate with Brendan for reorganization. Do not disappoint me. Thorstein stood and bowed, his Plantagenet language stiff. I will obey, my lord. We will not fail you. The meeting concluded, and the men dispersed to their duties. Thorstein stood alone in the hall, feeling the weight of uncertainty and a fragile hope for survival. He knew the real test had only just begun. 2 days later, at the former site of Winter's Port on the southwest peninsula, Baron Cyril von Eichberg, the former lord, huddled in a damp, moldy storage room. Once a place for junk, it was now his only home. Thorstein had seized his bedroom, and Cyril's authority had vanished since the Solonians arrived. The subjects saw through his incompetence, and with the new rulers in charge, his noble status meant nothing. Despised by the people, he received no aid. Cyril was forced to forage for berries and shellfish like a common refugee. Unaccustomed to labor, he often had his meager findings stolen by others. Within days, he was gaunt, ragged, and filled with hunger and resentment. Footsteps approached. Lise, his former maid, walked by in clean clothes, accompanied by Solon soldiers. She wore an expression of arrogant satisfaction. The subjects bowed to her with a mix of fear and respect. As the woman favored by the Solonian commander, Lise was no longer the submissive maid she once was. Following Thorstein, she had learned the nature of power. She worshipped strength as a survival instinct. National loyalty meant nothing to her. She saw the state's collapse as the fault of the elite, not her own. She felt no obligation to suffer for a country that had treated her as a disposable commodity. Born to a poor family, she had been sent to the Eichberg household as a low-level maid. When the pioneering decree was issued, she was treated like luggage and sent to the northern frontier with the disgraced Cyril. Cyril had ignored her, leaving her to perform the most grueling labor. She had endured frozen hands and burns, living a life of misery. After the Solonian attack, she had survived the displacement to the southwest peninsula. As the last maid, she became Cyril's object of abuse. Her days were spent in toil and her nights in humiliation. Then, Thorstein arrived like a whirlwind. She watched as he dragged Cyril out and threw him to the ground. Cyril's facade of nobility shattered instantly. Thorstein then turned his attention to her. Though the encounter was forced, she felt a strange, thrilling power in his dominance. She despised Cyril's cowardice and was drawn to Thorstein's undeniable strength. Her life changed immediately after. Thorstein assigned slaves to assist her, and she no longer had to struggle for food. She understood she was merely a tool, but Thorstein's possession also meant protection. He was a true conqueror with a powerful army. Because of him, those who once bullied her now treated her with deference. This tangible improvement in her status was far more convincing than any abstract ideal. To her, power was truth, Those who could ensure her survival were worth following. She followed Thorstein willingly, enjoying the status that came with his protection. Seeing Lise, Cyril looked at her as if she were his only hope. I watched as Cyril crawled to Lise, begging hoarsely for a scrap of bread or bran, pleading for their past connection. I observed Lise looking down at the gaunt, foul-smelling man with unconcealed disgust. I heard her sneer, "Connection? You treated me as a bed warmer and a punching bag. Why should I help you now?" I listened as she added, "Thorstein's food is for the useful, not waste like you. Rot here." I saw Cyril tremble with spite, but under the Solon soldier's cold gazes, he collapsed into the dirt, paralyzed by despair. Suddenly, I saw Solon cavalry arrive, led by Thorstein's confidant. I watched Lise approach, feigning concern. "You're back? How is Thorstein?" I saw the confidant dismount, looking weary but composed. I watched him brandish Thorstein's ornate saber before the soldiers and Plantagenet survivors. I heard him announce, "Thorstein has negotiated with the Lord of Confort. We are relocating there, a place with a sturdy castle, food, and safety." I noted how he avoided the word surrender, framing it as a relocation. The news caused a stir. I saw the Solonians were relieved at the prospect of leaving the ruins. I knew they were exhausted by the barren conditions. I saw the Plantagenet slaves become ecstatic, having heard legends of the young, heroic Lord of Confort, myself, and my impregnable fortress. I watched as the chance to escape Solon control for a powerful Plantagenet lord brought tears of joy to their eyes. I saw everyone immediately begin packing their meager belongings. I knew they had little, worn clothes, crude tools, and minimal rations. 400 people gathered. I learned that Cyril, hearing of my territory, recognized my name. I recalled that he had once bet that the exiled Schmidt's son wouldn't survive a month. Now, I had defeated the Solon army, and even these barbarians were defecting to me. I saw that Cyril was consumed by bitter jealousy. Instead of gratitude, I heard him curse me, vowing to expose me for treason for harboring Solonians once he returned to the capital. I watched the confidant approach Cyril after organizing the departure. I heard him say, "Cyril, Commander Thorstein left a gift in your room as thanks for your hospitality. Come retrieve it." Starving and desperate, I saw a flicker of hope for food or money in Cyril's eyes. I watched him follow the man into his former bedroom. I saw the room was empty save for some bedding. "Where is it?" I heard Cyril wheeze, searching frantically. I saw the confidant's expression turn lethal. I watched him draw a dagger, whispering coldly, "Here it is." I saw him lunge, driving the blade into Cyril's gut. I heard Cyril shriek, his eyes wide with shock and agony. I watched him stare at the blade, unable to comprehend the betrayal. I heard the confidant whisper in his ear, "Lord Karl sends his regards." I saw Cyril's pupils contract. Realization dawned too late as he collapsed. I watched the confidant ensure he was dead with several precise strikes. I saw him then loot the room of anything valuable. I watched him pour lamp oil over the furniture and curtains, setting them ablaze. I saw the room quickly consumed by fire as he exited and locked the door. I watched him mount his horse and signal the group, "Move out." To Confort. I saw the crowd glance at the burning castle but quickly look away. I noticed no one asked questions or turned back. I realized the castle was now just a discarded memory. I knew they were leaving their cage of poverty and humiliation. I understood they knew they would never return to this cursed land. I felt that the future, however uncertain, was better than rotting here. I saw that no one cared if Cyril escaped the fire. He was a stone dropped into a swamp, leaving no ripple. In this brutal land, I knew a fallen noble's disappearance was trivial. I saw any fleeting thought of him replaced by the excitement of their new life. I watched the column ride away, leaving the burning castle and its memories in the black smoke. A week later, I saw a massive, exhausted column appear on the road to Confort. 55 Solon cavalry led over 300 ragged Plantagenet slaves toward my fortress. Seeing the stone castle with the Plantagenet flag and the bustling construction site below, I watched the crowd erupt. "Look, it's the castle," I heard them cry. "The Plantagenet flag. They're building walls. We're saved." I saw despair turn to hope. The slaves smiled for the first time in years. I knew the thriving, fortified site was the sanctuary they had dreamed of. I had watchtowers signal their arrival to the castle. I was informed immediately. I ordered my officers to assemble the troops and prepare for the surrender ceremony. Though I controlled Thorstein, I knew the reaction of the remaining 55 cavalry remained a variable. I oversaw the preparations as I swiftly mobilized Conford's military forces. Brendan led the pikemen phalanx, lining up behind the gaps in the outer wall with a forest of gleaming spears. Richter positioned musketeers and archers on the newly built arrow towers and platforms, weapons loaded and ready. Leon and Roland stood by with 50 elite cavalry, prepared to charge from the flank. I watched as Thorstein's troops were stunned by the defensive formation at the mountain pass. The checkpoint was heavily guarded by my soldiers in pristine armor with drawn weapons and cold, alert eyes. The sentry captain commanded in a mix of Solon and Plantagenet. Halt. Dismount. Surrender all weapons and horses for inspection and reorganization. The Solon cavalry erupted in outrage. Surrender our horses and weapons. Are they joking? We're nothing without our blades. It's a trap to disarm us. Fight them. The Solonians grew restless, gripping their sabers with defiant, angry expressions. To them, their weapons and horses were their life and dignity. Surrendering them was unbearable. Tension peaked as my Plantagenet soldiers stepped forward, leveling their spears at the Solonians. Musketeers and archers on the towers aimed their weapons directly at the agitated cavalry. Leon's cavalry began maneuvering to flank them, bringing the situation to the brink of conflict. I cut through the tension with a calm voice. Put down your weapons. I emerged, flanked by Brendan and my officers, accompanied by a resolute but conflicted Thorstein. I scanned the restless cavalry and nodded to Thorstein. Thorstein stepped forward to face his men. He looked at their familiar, angry faces and spoke clearly in Solon. Brothers, calm down and listen. I can no longer hide the truth, Thorstein said bitterly. We are not here for an alliance. We are surrendering to Lord Karl of Conford. Surrender? The word shocked the cavalry, who stared at their commander in disbelief. Surrender to the Plantagenets? Have you lost your mind? We are Solon warriors. This is a disgrace. The crowd erupted in betrayal and rage. My Plantagenet soldiers tightened their formation, weapons ready. Leon gripped his lance, waiting for my order to crush the chaotic enemy. Thorstein shouted over the noise. Shut up and listen. He glared at them. Look at yourselves. Look at the starving slaves behind us, this barren wasteland, and heralds approaching iron hooves. Tell me, what path is there besides surrender? Death. The reality silenced the crowd, leaving them in despair. Thorstein softened his tone. Lord Karl is a man of his word. He promised us shelter and food if we truly submit. We will become his soldiers, protected by his laws. With merit, we may even earn land and status. I signaled my men. Soldiers brought out steaming buckets of rye porridge, the rich aroma filling the air. For the starving Solon soldiers and Plantagenet slaves, the scent was an irresistible temptation. Their hunger flared, overriding their pride. Compared to survival, abstract honor seemed less significant. Thorstein pleaded, "Trust me one last time. Surrender to live and secure a future for us all. I swear by our ancestors, I will not lead you to ruin." A long silence followed as the cavalry struggled with their decision. Fear of death, hunger, and trust in their commander eventually overcame their defiance. A clatter rang out as Thorstein's aide dropped his saber and stepped forward. One by one, the others followed, dropping their weapons and dismounting to surrender to my Plantagenet soldiers. The potential bloodbath was averted. Leon lowered his lance, his eyes showing disappointment. He had secretly hoped for resistance so he could avenge his family's blood. I breathed a sigh of relief as the surrender proceeded. The group of 55 Solon prisoners and 300 slaves was escorted through the outer wall into the city. The construction site erupted in chaos. Conford's subjects stopped working, staring in shock at the strange procession. Seeing the disarmed, dejected Solonians in their furs and braids, the crowd was stunned. Solonians? How did they get in? Barbarians. Shock turned to volcanic rage as the northern survivors remembered their burned homes and slaughtered families. Kill them. Get out, you butchers. Revenge. The crowd grabbed stones and tools, surging toward the prisoners. The situation spiraled toward violence. The unarmed Solonians huddled together in terror, pelted by stones. "Stop! Everyone stop!" Brendan, Richter, and Roland shouted, forming a human wall with their soldiers to block the crowd. "Back to work. This is the Lord's order. No one acts without command," Brendan thundered. Under the officers' strict discipline, the crowd reluctantly returned to their posts. However, the hateful glares of the workers kept the prisoners trembling. The riot was contained. The prisoners were herded into an empty lot to await their fate. A brief, solemn surrender ceremony began. I stood with my officials as Thorstein approached. Lacking a regimental flag, Thorstein's aide presented the commander's saber, adorned with eagle feathers and silver rings. Thorstein took the blade, looked at it one last time, then knelt before me and held it up with both hands. "I, Thorstein, former commander of the Solon Sparrow Legion Vanguard, surrender to you, Lord Karl von Schmidt," Thorstein declared, his voice trembling slightly. I stepped forward and accepted the saber, the symbol of command. This act finalized the transfer of power and the conquest. Steward Edgar stepped forward and read the harsh terms of surrender aloud. Each clause turned the Solonians' faces paler. Edgar then asked Thorstein, "Do you accept these terms on behalf of your unit?" Silence fell over the crowd. Thorstein bowed his head to the ground and shouted, "I accept. I accept everything." I drew my steel sword, the sunlight glinting off the blade, and tapped Thorstein's shoulders. "By this sword," I declared, "I accept your surrender. From this moment, your lives and honor belong to the laws of Conford and my will. Obey, and you shall live. Betray me, and you shall face the blade." The ceremony was brief but oppressive. The surrender was complete. The Solonian prisoners were marched to a designated isolation zone at the castle's southwest corner. Maul had prepared makeshift semi-subterranean shelters there, providing basic protection from the elements. Next came the reorganization. Officers Brendan, Richter, Roland, Miller, and Creek broke the 55 prisoners into new, randomized squads. They were divided into 2 platoons of roughly 30 men, each containing 3 10-man squads. 10 reliable Plantagenet recruits were assigned as squad and platoon leaders. These young officers were nervous but determined. This structure ensured control over the prisoners while training the new officers in management. By evening, it was time for the prisoners' first meal. Large pots of hot, thick rye porridge were brought to the isolation zone. The aroma drew hungry stares from the prisoners. Under the supervision of their new leaders, the men lined up and received a hearty bowl each. They ate ravenously, looking satisfied and relieved. For those who had been starving, the hot porridge was more effective than any promise in securing their loyalty and ending thoughts of rebellion. Thorstein was nominally appointed commander of the 1st Foreign Legion Company, though he knew it was a hollow title. Real authority rested with the overseer, Richter. Thorstein accepted this reality without protest. Survival for himself and his men was the best outcome he could hope for. I treated the 300 Plantagenet slaves from Winter's Port differently. As fellow countrymen and victims of Solonian raids, they deserved better treatment. I ordered them housed in the outer city, in structures previously used by the first wave of settlers and wounded soldiers. These semi-subterranean stone houses were far sturdier and drier than the Solonians' temporary shelters. Maul had intended to demolish these shanties to improve the castle's aesthetics and sightlines. However, my focus on utility had kept them standing. The decision proved wise. When the slaves saw the sturdy stone walls and wooden roofs, many were moved to tears. Compared to the leaking huts and ruins of Winter's Port, these were luxury accommodations. They were grateful for the shelter. Their rations were also rye porridge, distributed based on labor capacity, ensuring everyone could recover their strength. This influx of labor was a godsend for Conford's manpower shortage. I shifted my original subjects and soldiers from the harvest to urgent wall construction. The new slaves were tasked with the autumn harvest. I wanted them productive immediately. That evening, Edgar gathered the new arrivals in the outer city. Standing on a wooden platform, Edgar introduced himself. "You are under the protection of Conford, which provides food and shelter." The crowd listened intently. Edgar continued, "Protection is not free. You have no land or property, So your tax is your labor. The crowd nodded in agreement. They were used to working for survival. Edgar set the quota. Starting tomorrow, everyone must harvest at least 100 pounds of rye or peas daily. Meet this quota, and your food and shelter are guaranteed. A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. The quota was incredibly low compared to their previous masters, who demanded double that amount. They were stunned by the leniency. Edgar smiled, seeing their reaction. Furthermore, those who exceed the quota will earn an extra bowl of porridge for every 10 pounds harvested. The harder you work, the better you and your families eat. The crowd erupted in excitement. The prospect of earning extra food ignited their motivation. Edgar delivered the final incentive. Outstanding contributors will be granted a letter of pardon, restoring their status as freemen. You will no longer be slaves, but full subjects of Conford with equal rights. Freemen? Pardoned? Restored to freedom? The slaves gasped in disbelief. The news hit them like a thunderbolt. Freedom was a dream they never dared to entertain. Edgar gestured toward the neat stone houses below. Look at those homes, he said firmly. Many who live there were once pioneer slaves, just like you, who arrived with the Lord. Because of their loyalty, I, Karl von Schmidt, signed an amnesty, granting them the status of freemen. They now own land, have families, and serve in the military. This is real. The opportunity is in your hands. Reality proved more persuasive than any lecture. Watching them gaze at the sturdy houses and the calm, busy subjects, I saw their skepticism vanish, replaced by intense gratitude and hope. Long live the Lord! They cheered, weeping and kneeling toward my castle in thanks. They had expected only survival, not freedom. I watched satisfied. My incentive policy had ignited their drive. Tomorrow, the wheat fields would be swarming with workers. I knew Conford's harvest and future development would accelerate significantly with this new, motivated workforce. At dawn, the golden wheat fields were a scene of unprecedented activity. Over 300 Plantagenet slaves became the backbone of the harvest. Armed with sharp flint sickles, they bent low into the waist-high rye. The rhythmic swish of blades filled the air, accompanied by the scent of grain and earth. Driven by survival and incentives, they worked with startling efficiency, binding the cut wheat into sheaves. Many adopted a two-person system. One cut while the other gathered and bundled. They rotated tasks to conserve energy, doubling their speed. Agreeing to split the harvest equally further fueled their collaborative spirit. The field was quiet, save for the sound of sickles, heavy breathing, and occasional words of encouragement. Though sweating profusely, their eyes shone with a hunger for a better future. They knew every extra bundle meant more porridge and a step closer to freedom. Meanwhile, I freed the original subjects and soldiers from harvest duties to focus on the urgent wall construction. 60 Solon prisoners, under strict supervision, joined the construction crews. These former cavalrymen traded their sabers and lances for shovels, picks, and rammers. They worked in silence, digging foundations and hauling stone and earth. Though initially met with hostility, their disciplined labor eventually eased the tension. I applied my work-for-food policy to the prisoners as well. They had to meet daily quotas to earn their rations. Extra output earned extra food, a simple incentive that proved highly effective. Weary of exile and despair, the Solonians now sought only stability and safety. Their desire for plunder was replaced by a drive to survive, and the rammed earth walls began to rise rapidly. Workers poured wet soil into frames, while laborers rhythmically compacted the layers. Master Mason Norman and his apprentices carefully faced the outer wall with stone. This stone layer was integrated directly into the rammed earth core. It served to protect the core from erosion and prevent enemies from easily dismantling the wall. Norman constantly checked the wall's level and stability. Inside, the young carpenter Elliot directed apprentices in building sturdy scaffolding and platforms. These structures facilitated construction and would serve as defensive walkways during a siege. From a high vantage point, I surveyed the harvest and the construction, feeling both urgency and a glimmer of hope. Edgar and Maul reported that the rye and peas would be harvested in 3 to 5 days. Even if autumn rains came, the main food supply would be safely stored. I was equally pleased with the wall's progress. With the additional labor from the slaves and prisoners, construction had accelerated. Maul predicted the outer perimeter would be defensible within half a month. Half a month. I calculated, my gaze turning toward the northern wilderness. This timeline aligned with Leon's recent intelligence reports. Leon's scout units were ranging further, bringing back increasingly urgent news. They had found clear signs of small Solonian raiding parties dozens of miles north. Fresh hoofprints, abandoned camps, and sightings of enemy scouts confirmed the threat. Though no direct clashes had occurred, the atmosphere was heavy with the coming storm. Harold's army was gathering. The autumn raids were imminent. Conford, a fortress still recovering from battle, would once again be the eye of the storm. Time was critical, but the harvest and the rising walls were our best defenses. Amidst the frantic activity, a familiar supply caravan arrived at the outer checkpoint. I immediately went to greet them. I knew that with the Solonian threat looming, this was likely the final, most vital supply drop from France City before winter. The familiar captain led the group. After a formal salute, he said gravely, "Lord Karl, by order of Count Rochefort, we deliver the final winter supplies. The Count warns that Solonian movements are confirmed. The road to France City may be cut soon. This is the final supply run. Please prepare accordingly." I nodded solemnly. "Understood. Thank the Count for me. Tell him Conford is ready to hold the line. We will not fail his expectations." The transport captain lowered his voice, telling me that Count Rochefort had sent a special gift alongside the regular supplies. Intrigued, I followed the captain to the rear of the convoy. A heavy four-wheeled carriage sat there, draped in thick canvas. The captain checked the surroundings before cautiously lifting a corner of the canvas. I gasped. Beneath the cover lay a pristine, long-barreled bronze cannon. Its sturdy frame and the nearby crates of cast-iron cannonballs marked it as a battlefield-changing weapon. "This is," I asked, my voice trembling with excitement. The captain proudly explained that the Count had sent this Minerva 6-pounder cannon from the France City arsenal to bolster Conford's defenses. Along with the cannon came 20 shells and 3,000 pounds of high-quality granulated black powder, intended to repel the Solonians. In the kingdom, 6-pounders are nicknamed Minerva, 3-pounders Mars, and 9-pounders Elephant. I struggled to contain my joy, my heart pounding. I asked the captain to convey my deepest gratitude to the Count, emphasizing that this gift represented immense trust and support. I knew a functional cannon held more strategic value than 100 cavalrymen. A hand tapped my shoulder. I turned to see a familiar face with golden hair peeking from under a hood. "Charlotte," I exclaimed, surprised to see the Count's daughter. Charlotte winked, explaining that her father wouldn't trust anyone else to escort such a vital weapon. Her expression dimmed as she added that this might be the last contact before the roads are fully blockaded. A calm voice interrupted. "Not just Charlotte, Lord Karl." A tall, sharp-eyed man with a sword at his waist stepped from behind the carriage. He carried the weathered look of a veteran. I recognized him immediately and bowed respectfully. "Master Andre, you've come." It was Andre Stein, the combat master and Charlotte's sword instructor, who had helped her reach Tier 2 knight status. He was also the sole survivor of the fall of the old Conford fortress. Andre smiled, noting that I was now the kingdom-famous Light of the North. He brandished a copy of the Kingdom Gazette, offering sincere praise. I humbly attributed the victory to my people and the Count's support. Andre's expression turned grave as he warned that Harold would retaliate with unprecedented force after the defeat of the Sparrow Legion. He declared his intent to stay and fight, vowing to prevent the tragedy of the past from repeating. His resolve was absolute. I felt a surge of warmth and welcomed him back to Conford. I lamented that we couldn't reach out for help during the initial Solonian siege. Andre dismissed the past, focusing on the present. He requested to inspect the current defensive layout immediately. Charlotte suggested he rest first, but Andre refused. He insisted that the Solonians wouldn't wait for tea, urging me to show him the walls. Admiring his urgency, I agreed and invited Charlotte to join. Charlotte nodded and walked beside me. I led them toward the construction site and the castle's defensive core. Before inspecting the walls, Andre made a somber request to visit the grave of Lord Marcus. I nodded solemnly and led them to the site. They arrived at a quiet, elevated slope behind the fortress. Two large, sturdy stone monuments stood there. The area was meticulously maintained and preserved. I explained that this was the Martyrs' Cemetery, with the front monument dedicated to those who fell during the fortress's collapse. Andre approached the stone, his hands trembling as he touched the engraved names. His eyes seemed to drift back to that day of fire and blood. I recounted how we had recovered Lord Marcus's remains from the castle ruins. I noted that they had fought to the very last man. I revealed that Marcus had swallowed a key in his final moments to keep it from the Solonians. Andre was stunned as I explained that the key had unlocked the secret chamber containing the complete process for the militia potion. This legacy had allowed us to produce the potion. It had saved many lives during the recent siege and secured our victory. I remarked that Marcus and his men were still protecting Conford even in death. I explained that we had buried Marcus with his soldiers so they could rest together on the land they died for. Andre listened in silence, his body trembling. He stared at the name Marcus von Horn and the long list of his fallen comrades. I moved my lips, but no sound emerged. After a long silence, I rasped, "Thank you." The words carried immense weight. They held grief for fallen comrades, gratitude for my respectful burials, and awe at this legacy spanning life and death. I nodded, accepting the thanks. I pointed to a newer grave. This one holds the 83 soldiers who fell defending Conford. My voice was firm. They routed Thorstein's Solon vanguard at Ashbourne, then stood their ground here against overwhelming odds, buying time for reinforcements to annihilate the enemy. Without their sacrifice, Conford would not exist today. Andre walked to the new grave, reading the names. The quality of the stones and the site's layout showed my deep respect. This was more than a burial. It was an honor meant to inspire the living. He turned to me with a complex expression. His eyes held shock, relief, and deep admiration. "Lord Karl," Andre said slowly, "you have far exceeded my expectations. You haven't just reclaimed Conford, you've inherited it. You honor its past while forging a new future with your own blood. If Lord Marcus could see you, he would be comforted." Andre added sincerely, "You are a wise and benevolent lord. Conford is lucky to have you. I apologize for my earlier doubts." The stern combat master had given his highest approval. I watched Charlotte, whose eyes were filled with pride and affection for me. I humbly shook my head. "You overstate it, master. I only did my duty. Conford's survival is the result of everyone's efforts." Andre waved off the modesty. "Merit is merit. Let us move on." His gaze turned sharp. "Show me the new armor and blades. Let me see the defense line we are to guard." I led Andre and Charlotte to inspect the defenses. We arrived at the bustling construction site of the outer walls. I explained, originally, this area was meant to be abandoned during a siege, retreating to the castle. But after the last battle, I realized that with muskets and the 6-pounder cannon the Count gifted us, we can inflict heavy casualties right here. I gestured toward the guarded carriage. "Furthermore," I continued, "I refuse to retreat immediately. If we do, the Solonians will simply block our path and starve us out. That would defeat our purpose as a northern frontier outpost, distracting the Solonians from France City." I pointed to the wall. "Expanding this line is harder, but strategically active. It forces the Solonians to commit massive numbers to surround us. This line will draw their main force into a siege where our muskets and cannons can decimate them." I pointed to the winding mountain path. "Of course, we won't fight to the death here. If the line fails, we retreat. The narrow corridor leading to the castle will be our next killing field." My eyes turned cold. "We've stockpiled rolling logs, boulders, and naphtha. If they pursue us into that corridor, it will be their graveyard. The castle itself is our final, most solid bastion, reinforced by my predecessors for decades. We will hold there until the enemy is exhausted or a turning point arrives." Andre listened intently, mapping out the tactical blueprint in his mind. He nodded deeply. "Your plan is excellent," Andre said, bowing respectfully. "Lord Karl, do not treat me as a guest. Treat me as a common soldier. Send me wherever the fighting is thickest." "I am at your command, my lord." His tone was absolute. I bowed in return. "With a warrior like you, our defenses are truly secure. Your presence is our greatest asset. Andre smiled. Strength only has value where it is needed. Let us begin. Do not arrange special quarters for me. Put me in a common barracks so I can get to know my comrades. I felt a surge of respect for the master's resolve. I understand, master. I turned to Edgar. Edgar, arrange a bunk for Master Andre in the barracks. Treat him as a volunteer soldier, but ensure his basic needs are met. Yes, my lord, Edgar replied. Andre bowed again. Thank you. I shall settle in and familiarize myself with the men. Send for me whenever you have orders. He walked toward the barracks with Edgar, blending in seamlessly with the soldiers. I watched him go, moved by his humility. Having such a powerful, grounded warrior was a massive boon. His pragmatic style had left a deep impression on me. Charlotte whispered, "That is Master Andre. He always puts duty first. With him here, the castle is safe." I nodded, feeling newfound confidence for the coming war. Once Andre left, Charlotte and I stood in the quiet castle, a sense of shared understanding between us. Our eyes met, and drawn by an invisible force, we embraced. We embraced in silence, savoring each other's warmth and heartbeat, our breathing gradually steadying as we poured our longing into the quiet, powerful hold. After a long while, Charlotte pulled back, looking up at me with a playful, tender smile. "Why are you just standing there?" she whispered, carefully pulling a silk-wrapped scroll from inside her clothes. The scroll looked exquisite, carrying a faint scent of royal incense. "Look at this. I brought it all the way here for you." I took it, noting the high quality of the material. "What is this?" "An imperial decree from His Majesty." Charlotte snatched it back, feigning seriousness. "The king was delighted by the Solonian heads you sent to the capital. Congratulations, Lord of Carnford. Receive your decree." I asked, surprised. "Wait, why are you the one delivering it instead of a royal envoy?" Charlotte crossed her arms, acting offended. "Am I not a Tier 2 Knight of the Kingdom? Is that not qualification enough?" Neil, amused, I asked. "Very well, my envoy. How should I proceed?" Charlotte instructed me sternly. "Don't you know court etiquette? An envoy with a royal decree represents the king himself. Kneel on one knee and listen." I sighed, straightened my clothes, and knelt solemnly. Watching me kneel, Charlotte felt a strange flutter in her heart, her cheeks flushing as if this were a marriage proposal rather than a decree. She cleared her throat, unfolded the scroll, and read in a solemn voice. "In the name of King Heinrich XI of the Plantagenet Kingdom, Lord of Carnford, Karl von Schmidt, hear this decree." I replied, "I, Karl von Schmidt, Lord of Carnford, humbly listen to His Majesty's command. For your bravery and wisdom in defending the frontier against the Solonians, your meritorious service has been witnessed by all. To honor your deeds, you are hereby promoted to Baron, titled Guardian of the North, and granted the Plantagenet Medal of Valor, along with silk, wine, and other rewards." Charlotte's voice faltered, speeding up as she added, "However, due to floods in the east and urgent defense needs, the monetary reward for the Solonian heads is temporarily recorded by the treasury. It will be paid when funds allow. We trust you will continue to serve the kingdom." "So decreed." Charlotte exhaled, rolled up the scroll, and asked, "Well, Baron Karl, rise. How do you feel?" I stood and brushed off my knees. "It's encouraging, though I didn't expect the king to give me an IOU." Charlotte nudged me. "Be grateful. A promotion and these rewards are generous. You must understand the kingdom's hardships." She whispered proudly, "Because of your success, my father was also rewarded. The king promised more grain for Franz City next year, perhaps even more than Blackstone Pass receives. Do you think that heavy cannon was easy to get? It's a vital defensive weapon, and Franz City has very few. My father fought hard to pull it from the armory despite the objections of the officers. He treats your position as his most important strategic point in the north." She poked my chest. "He knows Carnford will be besieged and that you lack heavy, decisive firepower. It took great effort to transport it here safely. He is truly investing in you." I felt a surge of warmth. I understood that the cannon represented strategic trust and support. "Thank you, Charlotte. Please convey my deepest gratitude to the Count." Charlotte beamed. "You're welcome. Now that my mission is done, shouldn't you treat your envoy to dinner?" I smiled and offered my hand. "Of course. Follow me. We have some excellent smoked meat tonight. Outside, I watched Edgar supervise the unloading of the transport. The cargo, 3,000 pounds of granulated black powder, a 6-pounder cannon, shells, and armor, required extreme caution. My personal guards handled the goods with care, ensuring no sparks were present. By dusk, all supplies were safely stored in a dry warehouse far from any fire sources. I invited the transport team to stay at the barracks, promising Leon would escort them back to France City in the morning. The captain gratefully accepted, knowing the escort would ensure their safety. That evening, the transport team rested in the barracks, while Charlotte stayed in my castle as if it were her own home. Though not officially engaged, our mutual devotion made us effectively a couple in the eyes of our inner circle. Charlotte retrieved her spare clothes from the wardrobe. She had clearly begun to view this place as her second home. Dinner was served in the small dining room on the second floor. The meal was hearty for Carnford: wheat bread, butter, meat broth, smoked meat, fish, and boiled vegetables. However, the atmosphere was strangely subdued compared to our reunion earlier. Charlotte, previously lively and playful, had become silent. She ate slowly, her movements elegant but distant and distracted. I tried to initiate light conversation, but Charlotte's responses were minimal. She offered only brief nods or smiles, her gaze frequently drifting toward the dark sky or the flickering shadows on the wall. I sensed something was wrong and felt a growing unease. I recalled her earlier playfulness, her bright blue eyes sparkling with wit and affection. She had been so vibrant then. Why, hours later, did she seem so melancholic and detached? Was she exhausted from travel? Her energy earlier suggested otherwise. Was she troubled by thoughts of Carnford's future, our relationship, or the war in France City? The dinner concluded in a heavy, awkward silence. Attendants quickly cleared the barely touched plates. I suppressed my concerns, assuming she needed rest. The hot water is ready. Go wash up. You must be tired. I'll do the same. Charlotte murmured in agreement and headed to the bathroom. I sighed, watching her leave, then went to the washroom to splash my face with cold water. After changing into comfortable linen pajamas, I returned to my bedroom and locked the door. I lay in bed, restless. The joy of our reunion was overshadowed by Charlotte's unusual silence during dinner. I wondered if she was exhausted or hiding something. Remembering our previous intimacy, I felt a flicker of hope, but her somber mood made me hesitate to disturb her. Sighing, I blew out the lamp, leaving the room in darkness save for the faint moonlight on the floor. Just as I settled, the door opened. I turned, heart racing, to see Charlotte's silhouette framed by the moonlight. She wore a silk nightgown that clung to her curves, shimmering softly in the dim light. Thin straps rested on her shoulders, revealing her collarbones and fair skin. Her golden hair, smelling of a fresh bath, cascaded over her shoulders as she moved. I had never seen her like this. Stripped of her armor and the dust of war, she looked like warm, polished jade, soft and languid, a stark contrast to her daytime persona. Yet, her inherent resilience remained, blending with this new softness to create a breathtaking beauty that held me captive. Realizing the night held more than I anticipated, I stood up, meeting her in the center of the room. The air between us was thick with tension and the scent of soap. Charlotte's cheeks were flushed, her blue eyes bright, yet filled with a hidden, resolute tension. My gaze involuntarily drifted to her neckline. The silk gown dipped low, revealing a glimpse of soft skin that seemed to pulse with warmth. Charlotte immediately noticed my wandering eyes. Embarrassed, I looked toward the bookshelf, my ears burning. To my surprise, Charlotte didn't seem annoyed. Instead, she let out a soft, clear laugh that rippled through the quiet room. Her laughter held no reproach, only a bold, candid invitation. "Carl, it's all right," she said, her voice low and magnetic. "If you want to look, then look." The implication was clear. She then reached up, slowly pulling the neckline of her gown lower, exposing more of her skin. The moonlight bathed the newly revealed skin in a saintly, seductive glow. I, however, met her eyes, finally understanding the depth of her gaze. Her silence at dinner wasn't fatigue. It was the result of an internal struggle. She had clearly made a decision to surrender herself completely to me. Though I didn't know what triggered this, I felt the weight of her love, nervousness, and resolve. A surge of tenderness and responsibility washed away my distractions. My nervousness vanished, replaced by a solemn desire to cherish her. I took her cool hand, my own trembling slightly, and said gently, "Charlotte, let's sleep." Charlotte looked up at me, her tension replaced by soft reliance. "Okay," she whispered. We moved to the bed in silence. Lying side by side, our rapid breathing betrayed our inner turmoil. Under the covers, Charlotte found my hand, and I gripped hers firmly. At this signal, we turned to face each other. In the moonlight, we could see the light in each other's eyes and the lingering tension on our faces. After a silence, Charlotte asked, "Carl, was I strange today? Did my mood scare you?" I replied softly, "It worried me, but I think I understand now." I started to ask why, but she cut me off. Charlotte pulled me close and kissed me, her lips firm and decisive. The brief, inexperienced kiss shattered the final barrier between us. Breathless, she stared at me in the dark. "Don't say anything, Carl." She traced my cheek, her touch filled with longing. "Let's begin. Let's forget all our problems tonight." "This is my first time," she added with shy resolve. "I don't want any regrets. I just want to remember you and us." With no more hesitation, we abandoned ourselves to the moment. In the dark, our senses sharpened. Every sound, our breathing, our racing hearts, the rustle of silk, was amplified. All doubts and barriers melted away like ice in the sun. Only raw, sincere desire remained. Our initial awkwardness was quickly swept away by a tide of emotion. Our murmurs wove together, speaking of longing, the joy of reunion, and a shared commitment to the future. Outside, the northern frontier was silent, the stars hidden, leaving only the warmth within the castle. After the passion, silence returned, broken only by our heavy breathing. Charlotte rested on my arm, listening to my steady heartbeat. I stroked her hair and finally asked, "Charlotte, we aren't married, not even engaged. Why the rush?" Charlotte stiffened slightly. "I'm afraid you'll die," she whispered. "I wanted to leave you an heir." I went silent, overwhelmed by emotion. Aside from my mother, I had never been loved so unconditionally, so recklessly. This love transcended social status, focusing only on the continuation of life and deep emotional connection. Charlotte continued, pleading, "Carl, promise me. If Conford falls, don't fight to the death. Break out, run to Friend City. No one will look down on you. Living is what matters most." I didn't speak. I propped myself up to look into her eyes in the dark. I could feel the worry and desperation in her gaze, but I shook my head firmly. "I won't run, Charlotte," I said calmly. "As I promised your father, I will defend Conford to the death. It is the gateway to the north and a fortress bought with blood. I will not abandon it, even if I am the last one standing." Charlotte grew anxious. She sat up, exclaiming, "What about me? What am I supposed to do if you die?" Realizing she was naked, she grabbed the blanket to cover herself, her face filled with anger and worry. I looked at her, feeling a mix of affection and helplessness. I reached out to comfort her. "Don't be like this. I've survived every crisis before, and this will be no different. Believe me, I won't die, and Conford won't fall." Charlotte laughed bitterly, tears in her eyes. "You say that every time. You're gambling with your life. This time is different. You've truly enraged them, and they will retaliate with everything they have. Even if they're busy looting this autumn, once they finish, they will swarm Conford and grind it to dust. The cowards in the capital won't save you. Even if my father wanted to, he couldn't stop the full force of the Solon tribes." Her words were filled with the cold, desperate reality of the North. I knew she spoke the truth, yet I only smiled. Seeing my reaction, Charlotte relaxed slightly, thinking I finally understood the gravity of the situation. She prepared to offer more comfort. Suddenly, I pinned her down, looking into her eyes with a roguish grin. "So what if I die? At least I've slept with a count's daughter. My life hasn't been in vain." I traced her abdomen. "You, however, must survive. Who knows? There might already be a little Carl or Charlotte in there." "You." Charlotte was speechless, her frustration hitting a wall of my nonchalance. She tried to strike me, but I held her close, and her resistance melted into our embrace. In August of the 7th year of Heinrich XI, the northern sky was shrouded in the shadows of impending war. The Solon tribes launched their massive autumn raid. Main forces from Frostgard and Jarvik poured out like a flood, heading toward the Plantagenet northern Great Wall. The Solon army split into two routes. The first, led by Commander Ulf of the Sparrow Legion, focused on containment. With the Sparrow Legion and the Skarn tribe, they totaled 24,000 men. Their mission was strategic deterrence, not siege warfare. 15,000 elite troops camped outside France City to project power. Their goal was to pin down Count Rockefeller's main force. This minimum force was mandated by Chieftain Harold. The new Count Rockefeller was far more aggressive than his predecessors. His years of small-scale harassment had made the Solon leadership wary. Furthermore, he was the secret patron of the troublesome Conford. Ulf also left 5,000 men to guard Frostgard. Guerrilla forces still operated in the mountains. The rear had to be secured against these flies attacking logistics. After these deductions, Ulf had only 4,000 mobile troops left. These were intended to follow the main force into the interior for looting. However, plans changed. Scouts reported that the border lord, had built a 300-meter wall at Conford. This ruined Ulf's plans. He had expected to easily drive the defenders back into their stone castle. The wall meant Conford could now hold out and counterattack. Damn Karl von Schmidt. Damn Conford. Ulf cursed. He was forced to divert 1,500 men to besiege Conford. This force included 400 infantry, 200 cavalry, and 900 auxiliaries and slaves. Ulf's mobile force dropped to under 2,000. With so few men, he couldn't risk entering the interior against Plantagenet regulars. He abandoned his looting plans to focus on France City and the hard nut of Conford. The second route was the true spearhead, split into three prongs. The Western Army, 50,000 strong, consisted of the Wolf, Bear, and Tiger legions. They aimed to break through the Blackstone Pass. Their goal was to strike at the heart of the kingdom, the capital, Place. Taking the capital was impossible with 50,000 men. Their intent was to cause panic and force Heinrich XI to recall his armies. This would create a power vacuum elsewhere for the other armies to exploit. The Central Army, 28,000 strong, comprised the Hound, Sword, and Rain legions. They would target smaller, weaker passes like Wharton's Castle. Once through, they would sweep the grain-rich, commercial regions east of the capital. This pincer movement would exhaust the kingdom's defenses and maximize looting. The Eastern Army, consisting solely of the mobile cavalry legion, acted as a feint. They would harass and conduct mock attacks on difficult terrain. Their mission was to pin down elite Plantagenet border troops. By keeping these forces occupied, they prevented them from reinforcing the interior. Nearly 100,000 men crashed against the northern border like a steel flood. At Conford, my 300-meter outer wall was finally complete. It stood 4.5 meters high and 3 meters thick, built of rammed earth to withstand siege engines. I watched as Mason Norman and his apprentices reinforced the wall exterior with stone slabs, rendering it resistant to excavation. I observed that the wall follows a three-quarter arc, integrating ruined towers and bastions into a cohesive defensive network of mutually supporting fire points. I noted that this curved design eliminates blind spots at the base, allowing for crossfire against any approaching enemy. I saw that a single gate is positioned at the apex of the arc. The 5-meter-wide gate allows 3 fully armed cavalrymen to charge out simultaneously for rapid counterattacks, as I have planned. I ensured the gate structure is reinforced by massive logs embedded deep into the rammed earth walls. To prevent battering ram damage, I had the frame encased in thick, compacted earth, making it appear as a solid wall from the outside. The gate consists of 2 thick, solid timber doors over half a meter deep, which I inspected personally. Reinforced with iron hoops, rivets, and internal cross-planking, I am confident the doors are highly impact-resistant. I believe this design effectively withstands shield card impacts and minor explosive damage. Inside, I have placed 3 massive hardwood beams to serve as the primary locking mechanism. These beams rest in deep grooves I had carved into the inner gate walls. I ordered the guards to use winches to drop these beams into place, effectively sealing the gate. I am certain the gate is virtually impenetrable from the outside without internal release. A wooden fighting platform runs along the wall, equipped with crenellations and firing ports. Under Maul's direction, I have ensured the interior is stocked with defensive supplies. I have piles of rocks, logs, and heavy spiked shutters with winches ready for use. I have set up dedicated areas to boil water or oil to pour onto attacking Solonians. I have also prepared improvised naphtha jars. I have seen Conford's standing force reach 750 men. This includes 150 veterans, 40 musketeers, Leon's 50 cavalry, and 500 militia provided by the Count, all of whom I oversee. I know an additional 1,000 able-bodied men can be mobilized, with the entire population available as a last resort. They fight for survival, as I have warned them that the Solonians will show no mercy if Conford falls. I believe holding the town is their only hope for life. With 80 flintlock muskets, 20 matchlock muskets, and archers, I have calculated the ranged force to exceed 150 men. The 6-pounder cannon I have hidden on the hillside remains our greatest psychological weapon. Master Andre, a Tier 3 knight, provides additional support, and I have confirmed that grain reserves are at an all-time high. I had over 300 Plantagenet slaves harvest all rye and peas before the weather turned. Our stores include 80,000 caddies of rye, 10,000 caddies of beans, plus salted meat, dried vegetables, and forest forage, which I have inventoried. I am confident these supplies are more than enough to sustain the 3,000 residents through a long winter siege. At the training ground, I watch as dust rises while soldiers practice drills. I observe Roderick gripping a padded wooden staff, his eyes scanning for enemies. I see him remain low and focused, anticipating the simulated assault. His squad is drilling the Mandarin duck formation, a new tactic I introduced. The 12-man unit is highly specialized. I have 2 shield bearers lead the front with large wooden shields. Their role is to absorb impact and create space. I have instructed them to use their short swords for last-ditch defense. Behind each shield bearer, I have placed a tongpa bearer. The tongpa, a trident-like weapon, is used to lock, deflect, or disarm enemy weapons, as I have taught them. 2 spearmen stand behind each tongpa bearer, as per my formation design. They provide the primary reach and lethality, striking through gaps in the front line, just as I intended. The final 2 members are musketeers, providing the ranged support I mandated. An auxiliary soldier follows, carrying supplies and tasked with collecting heads, proof of kills, during lulls, a role I established. The squad leader commands from a safe position, using whistles and signals I designed to coordinate movement. I watched them face 30 Solonian infantry in a mock assault. The attackers attempt to overwhelm the formation with brute force, just as I expected. An attacker charges Roderick, swinging a wooden staff. I watch Roderick parry the blow and counter with a precise strike to the attacker's chest. The attacker falls, signaling his death, under my watchful eye. Another Solonian attempts to flank Roderick's position, which I observe closely. I see Roderick shift his spear to pin the attacker's shield. He calls out, "Oliver." Oliver, the tongpa bearer, thrusts his weapon forward, locking the attacker's sword, just as I trained him to do. Oliver pushes, forcing the attacker back and neutralizing the threat, which I note with satisfaction. The Mandarin duck formation stands firm like a bristling fortress, exactly as I envisioned. Shield bearers hold the line, tongpa bearers neutralize threats, and spearmen strike with precision, all under my tactical guidance. The attackers fail to break the formation, suffering constant casualties while I observe the drill. Squad leader William blows his whistle, signaling an advance, as I instructed. The unit moves forward in perfect unison under my observation. The auxiliary soldier moves up to collect heads from the fallen before rejoining the ranks, as I have commanded. Pass. 10th drill complete. 10-minute break. William announces, following my protocol. The soldiers relax, their tension dissipating as I watch. They gather in the shade to drink water and wipe away sweat and dust while I review their performance. Despite their exhaustion, I can see they feel confident in their improved combat effectiveness. The squad, having suffered losses in previous battles, has been replenished with 3 new recruits to reach full strength, as I ordered. William remains the leader, Supported by veterans like Roderick, Oliver, and Mark, whom I trust to maintain the unit's discipline. I rewarded my veteran soldiers with medals, bonuses, and increased monthly pay from 1.5 to 2 silver coins, plus improved food rations. Each man received 27 pounds of rye, 0.5 pounds of salted or dried meat, 0.3 pounds of salt, and 1.5 pounds of dried peas monthly. With the Solon army looming and supplies scarce, I knew these rations were more valuable than silver coins. However, I kept the ranks unchanged. William stayed a squad leader, and Roderick remained a combat soldier. Though they privately wondered why, they assumed it was due to insufficient merit or seniority. Consequently, I observed them feeling excited rather than fearful about the impending Solon siege. New battles meant new opportunities for merit, the only currency for promotion. The first company, composed of my battle-hardened veterans, focused training on Mandarin duck formation tactics, tactical coordination, and individual combat skills. I ensured the training was intense, prioritizing combat proficiency and adaptability. William noticed Roderick practicing alone, sparring against 3 soldiers acting as enemies. Roderick held his own, using a long spear to face 3 opponents simultaneously. Despite their coordinated attacks, Roderick's footwork and precise parrying, blocking, and thrusting neutralized their offense while creating counterattack openings. Within rounds, he struck the vital points of all 3, defeating them. William was stunned. Roderick's growth was incredible. A few months ago he was a reckless recruit, but now he was among the company's elite. No wonder he earned a combat medal, William mused. He looked toward the larger training ground. The air was filled with shouts and instructor commands. Hundreds of new recruits were practicing basic formations and spear thrusts. These were the 500 militia members provided by the Count, recently transitioned from wall construction to military training. Their treatment differed from the combat soldiers. Lacking cash pay, they received basic rations, 22 pounds of rye, 0.3 pounds of meat, 0.1 pounds of salt, and 1 pound of peas. Coming from impoverished backgrounds as miners or farmers, they were accustomed to hardship. In France City, militia training offered little extra food, forcing them to rely on manual labor for survival. In Conford, I ensured consistent training guaranteed enough food for their families. For these people, this stability represented hope. Furthermore, I promised that those who excelled in training and combat could be promoted to regular combat soldiers. Becoming a combat soldier meant a significant pay raise to 1.5 silver coins and better rations. This path offered them a chance to settle down and change their families' fates. This clear incentive fueled the recruits' enthusiasm. Despite their clumsiness and confusion during drills, they trained diligently, without complaint. Watching them, William saw his own past reflected in their efforts. Suddenly, platoon leader Miller's voice boomed. "Attention! 1st, 2nd, and 3rd squads, assemble." William immediately shouted, "Assemble! Form up!" The soldiers sprang into position. Roderick joined the line as other platoons followed suit. Within seconds, the soldiers were in place. 150 soldiers from 3 platoons stood in formation. "Stand at attention," Miller commanded. The soldiers snapped into a crisp, disciplined stance. Company Commander Brendan approached. Miller saluted and reported. "Company Commander, 3 platoons assembled and ready for orders." Brendan returned the salute, scanning his battle-hardened veterans. "I know you've been wondering why you haven't been promoted despite your merits," he said loudly. The ranks remained silent, though many eyes flickered. Brendan pointed to the recruits. "You are the backbone of Conford. Those 500 recruits are your responsibility now." All eyes turned toward the recruits. "Your mission is to be their whetstone. Use your experience and tactics to train them until they are as disciplined and capable as you are." Brendan's voice was firm. "Once they are battle-ready, our army will expand, creating a need for more officers. You are the priority for promotion. Training them is your current mission and your path to advancement." Miller, Creek, Eddie, continue training, Brendan ordered before departing. Miller turned to his squads, grinning. "You heard him. The hard work begins now. We're going to be the enemy for those greenhorns." He warned them. "If anyone fails to beat those recruits, don't expect mercy from me." "Understood." The soldiers replied, their spirits ignited. They realized that training recruits was the shortcut to their own advancement. Don't get too comfortable, Miller added. To ensure you don't embarrass yourselves, we start night training tonight. 5 kilometers in full gear. A collective groan rippled through the ranks. Despite the complaints, no one refused. Despite their suffering, a fire of ambition for status and military glory burned in every soldier's eyes. They knew their current toil paved the way for future promotions. 10 days later, the Solon army's iron hooves finally reached France City. Ulf led 15,000 elite Sparrow Legion soldiers to a high ground north of France City, establishing a massive, intimidating camp within kilometers of the walls. En route, a detachment of 1,500, 400 infantry, 200 cavalry, and 900 auxiliaries split off toward Confort as planned. A minor incident occurred as they approached. Confort scouts attempted to observe the Solon force, but were quickly driven back by vanguard cavalry. Though no battle ensued, the report of this skirmish surprised Ulf. He gazed toward the distant, newly fortified Confort with a grave expression. Karl, he has guts, Ulf thought. Despite being heavily outnumbered, the young lord dared to send scouts rather than cowering. This aggression proved Karl was no passive defender, marking him as a significant threat. Ulf became convinced that Confort was a variable that required strict containment. He ordered the detachment commander, Hermod, to secure the area, block all routes from Confort, and hold firm. Stay like a nail, he commanded. Prevent them from threatening our supply lines or contacting France City. He strictly forbade any offensive action, ordering them to stay outside musket range while awaiting Mage Thor's support. Once Mage Thor arrives, he will summon low-level monsters to exhaust their ammunition, stamina, and resolve. Only then will Hermod move. The messenger departed, leaving Ulf confident in his strategy. Spending 1,500 men to isolate Confort was a worthwhile investment to secure his flank. More importantly, he held a trump card. Once Mage Thor's monster horde arrived, Karl's walls would become a graveyard. The constant terror would drain the defenders' supplies and spirit. Karl had lured the Solon army to his walls, but they would be his tomb. Ulf refocused on his primary target, Count Rockefort. Outside France City, Ulf camped within sight of the city, using his massive force and Black Eagle banners to exert psychological pressure. He kept just outside the range of the city's heavy artillery to avoid unnecessary losses. Instead of traditional trenches, he formed a loose, tribal-style cavalry camp around his command tent. Scouts patrolled the surrounding dozens of miles. This apparent lack of defense was a calculated trap. Ulf hoped the cautious Count Rockefort would be provoked into a field battle. If the Plantagenet army left their fortifications, Ulf's 7,000 elite heavy cavalry hidden in the rear would annihilate them. This was his true kill shot, using himself as bait to force a decisive field engagement. Simultaneously, Ulf sent Skarn light cavalry to seize key forest paths and mountain passes west of France City. Their mission was to sever all communication between France City and the Blackstone Pass. This forced messages to take long, inefficient routes, delaying information by days. Ulf aimed to turn France City into an information-starved island, leaving the Count isolated and paranoid. His tactics were a mix of bold provocation and lethal traps. However, Count Rockefort was no novice. He understood Ulf's ploys well after a decade of fighting Solonians. Before the enemy arrived, the Count had already positioned heavy artillery and stockpiled defensive supplies. The soldiers stood ready, displaying a firm resolve to hold the city. This was a direct response to Ulf. They would remain unmoved, refusing to be baited into a reckless field battle. Meanwhile, the Count's elite cavalry harassed the Solon light cavalry, fighting to break the information blockade. Every scrap of intelligence gained was vital. The Count's most brilliant move was clearing all forests and ruins within miles of the city. From the walls, the view was now an open no-man's land. This zone prevented the Solon army from approaching stealthily or gathering wood for siege engines, significantly increasing their costs. Unlike the calculated standoff at France City, the situation at Confort was immediate and intense. Hermod, a cautious commander, led the siege force. He marched his troops to the foot of my hill, stopping 3 kilometers from my new walls to deploy. 1,500 Sorin barbarians filled the valley. Their battered armor and fierce expressions created a psychological pressure far exceeding previous skirmishes. New recruits on my walls paled, their hands sweating as they gripped their weapons. "Steady!" veteran soldiers and officers barked, stabilizing the wavering lines. "Remember your training. No matter how many there are, they'll just die at our feet." The veterans' calm effectively quelled the panic. Below, Hermod studied my transformed fortress, frowning in silence. Beside him stood Unag, looking complex and embarrassed. Having fled a month ago, he had returned as a defeated advisor. Looking at my towering new walls and reinforced arrow towers, Unag muttered, "Incredible, to build such a complete defense in just 1 month." I recalled the ruins from a month ago, unsettled by the efficiency and resilience of the Plantagenet forces at Confort. Hermod stared at the fortifications, asking, "Unag, you fought them. How strong is their resolve and combat capability?" Unag's face darkened, the memory of his defeat still fresh. "They are formidable," Unag replied heavily. "Far superior to typical Plantagenet border troops. They are disciplined and fearless." He hesitated, then added, "Their equipment is excellent, including our own captured plate armor. But the muskets are the true terror. They inflicted heavy casualties in the open. Now behind these walls." He trailed off, leaving the implication clear. Hermod's expression grew grim. "The walls are hastily built but expertly planned," Hermod noted. "The interlocking fields of fire and defensive layout suggest a commander who knows exactly what they are doing." He weighed his options in silence. Finally, he decided, Ulf's orders are merely to besiege and monitor them, preventing interference with our main force. We wait for the mages and use the goblins and kobolds as cannon fodder. No need to suffer unnecessary casualties attacking this stronghold now. He ordered, "Set up camp. Keep a safe distance from their musket range." Unag warned, "Commander, stay even further back. Their flintlock muskets have terrifying range and precision." Hermod, surprised by the emphasis, instructed the messengers to ensure the camp was well out of range. The Solon army retreated to a nearby hillside, digging trenches and erecting a sturdy camp for a long-term siege. It was clear they intended to play the long game. On the walls, I watched the Solonians retreat with Brendan and Andre, feeling a sense of relief. "They intend to starve us out," Brendan remarked. I lowered my telescope, telling my officers, "Good. They've committed at least 2,000 elite Sparrow Legion troops. We've fulfilled our strategic goal of diverting Solon forces from France City. The longer they stay, the more pressure we relieve from Count Rockefort." I issued orders, double the night watches. Deploy scouts and patrols to prevent surprise attacks. Keep all weapons ready. Edgar, ensure the subjects and laborers remain calm. Maintain fair rations to prevent internal unrest. Tighten security on the Solon prisoners as well. "Yes, my lord," the officers replied, moving to execute my commands. At Winterholm, a small border fortress on the western branch of Blackstone Pass, Knight Friedrich von Schmidt stood alone on the cold ramparts. Fully armored and armed, he remained as steady and imposing as a statue in the dark. Yet, his mood was as heavy as the night. The kingdom sent him to Blackstone Pass to balance power against Count Eisenberg. Such a vital pass could not be left solely under the control of the Eisenberg family. As the capable eldest son of Duke Schmidt, Friedrich was the natural choice. While willing to serve, Friedrich was frustrated by Count Eisenberg's passive, turtle-like defensive strategy. He had repeatedly urged the Count to act, arguing that while Eagle's Nest Fortress was strong, the massive Solon force would not limit their assault to a single point. Friedrich argued that small fortresses like Winterholm must be garrisoned to create a defensive chain, but Count Eisenberg rejected this, insisting on concentrating forces at Eaglenest. Merged with 8,056, forced to act alone, Friedrich went to Winterholm to bolster its defenses himself. As a Tier 4 knight, he was a one-man army, but I knew he was still only one man. The Blackstone Pass contained dozens of checkpoints and hundreds of fortresses. I realized he could not defend them all. Upon arriving at Winterholm, I watched as Friedrich was horrified to find fewer than 400 soldiers present, despite the fortress being officially manned by 800. The massive shortfall suggested to me that Count Eisenberg and his cronies were embezzling military pay across the entire Blackstone Pass line. This was not just corruption. It was a betrayal of the kingdom's defense. I saw that the fortress was in shambles. I observed that weapons were rusted, shields were rotting, bowstrings were slack, and muskets were scarce and poorly maintained. Worse, I noted that a section of the northern wall had a gap large enough for 2 men to walk through, blocked only by debris. Friedrich forced the lazy garrison to patch the breach with stone and wood. Standing on the wall, I watched Friedrich look toward Eglinist, the brightly lit, seemingly impregnable fortress on the ridge. I could see he felt no security, only dread and fury. I realized Eisenberg had hoarded the kingdom's elite troops at Eglinist while abandoning the outer perimeter, leaving the entire line exposed. A messenger arrived, gasping for air, bearing the latest intelligence. It was the final report to slip through the blockade. France City was under siege by Ulf's main force. Count Rochefort was trapped and could provide no support to Blackstone Pass. "We are on our own," Friedrich muttered, and I watched his grip tighten until his nails dug into his palms. I could see the weight of total isolation crushing him. Before Friedrich could even plan how to reinforce his position with the remaining troops, the situation escalated. A sharp, mournful horn blast tore through the night from the direction of Eglinist. Thunderous war drums followed, accompanied by frantic cries of enemy attack. "Salonians! They're here! Look at the torches!" Eglinist erupted in chaos. I saw thousands of torches flare like dragons in the dark, punctuated by the roar of muskets and the clash of steel. The battle had begun, and I realized the Salonians were launching a direct assault on Eglinist, the most heavily fortified core of the northern frontier. Friedrich rushed to the battlements, and I stared in disbelief at the burning sky over Eglinist. "How? They're actually storming Eglinist directly," Friedrich exclaimed. The carnage and fire at Eglinist transfixed the Winterhome garrison. I watched the soldiers crowd the walls, staring in terror and forgetting their own duties. "Idiots! Get back to your posts!" Friedrich roared, sensing a trap, but I saw that his efforts to organize them were futile. I realized his warning came too late. As I turned, I glimpsed shadows scaling the fortress walls facing the northern wilderness. 3 Salonian elites, faces painted in grim colors, secured iron hooks into the stone and breached the ramparts. It was a feint. The Salonians had used the diversion at Eglinist to target the undermanned Winterhome. With the guards distracted elsewhere, the wall was deserted. The elites quickly secured the section and began lowering ropes for reinforcements. "Damn it," I cursed, drawing my knightly longsword. The blade shimmered in the torchlight. "Enemy attack. Here, drive them back." The 3 elites were startled by my sudden discovery. They whistled a warning, drew their scimitars, and charged me in a pincer formation. Their coordinated movements marked them as veterans, equivalent to Tier 1 or Tier 2 knights. Yet, they faced me, Karl von Schmidt, a true Tier 4 knight. To me, their movements were sluggish and flawed. I ghosted between them, my sword tracing 2 lethal arcs. *// *2 elites fell, their throats severed before they could even react, their expressions frozen in disbelief. As the 3rd retreated, my blade struck true, piercing his heart. The 3 were dead in seconds, but more iron hooks appeared as waves of Salonian elites scaled the walls. I kicked a corpse off the wall, knocking several climbers down. I roared at the panicked guards, "Rolling logs! Oil! Move!" But Winterhome's stores were empty or filled with rot. There were no effective defenses left. Panic spread as a second Salonian team breached the opposite wall. The defenders there were slaughtered, jumped to their deaths, or fled in terror. The walls were nearly lost, with only a few scattered, isolated defenders remaining. I stood my ground, my sword acting as a scythe of death, each swing claiming a life. I held the wall alone, piling corpses high until the enemy hesitated to approach. Yet, individual valor could not turn the tide. Salonian soldiers reached the ground, killed the gate guards, and threw open the massive fortress doors. Boom! Solon cavalry, waiting in the darkness, surged into the fortress like a flood. They began a ruthless slaughter and set fire to the interior. Within an hour, Winterhome was falling, engulfed in flames and screams. I and 3 loyal soldiers made a final stand on a narrow staircase. Beneath us lay a mound of Solonian dead. Facing the tide of blood-crazed soldiers and the rampaging cavalry below, I felt a desperate fury. I channeled my battle chi and roared. In the name of the night. Second gust. The Tier 4 spell surged, pushing my life force to its limit, healing wounds, and restoring my strength and will. A pale golden aura swirled around me. My wounds closed, my fatigue vanished, and my gaze sharpened. Kill. I charged like a golden bolt of lightning, my sword becoming a storm. Solonian soldiers fell like wheat. Their weapons and armor were useless against my empowered blade. I cleared the wall single-handedly, leaving a trail of broken bodies. Then, to everyone's shock, I leaped from the wall. I landed, rolled, and thrust my sword upward. Thrust. A passing Solonian cavalryman was skewered and fell from his mount. I vaulted onto the panicked horse. The horse reared, but I brought it under control. Pointing my sword at the enemy, I roared. For Plantagenet. Follow me to retake the gate. My heroism ignited the remaining defenders. For the night. Fight the barbarians. Retake the gate. The defenders rallied, grabbing weapons and charging the looting Solonian infantry. I led the charge, a golden war god. The Solonians fled or were cut down. With my men's help, we cleared the gatehouse. Closed the gate. I dismounted and shouldered the heavy door. The survivors pushed with their final strength. Boom! The ironclad doors slammed shut and the bolt was thrown. Cut the ropes. Now, I ordered. Soldiers severed the climbing ropes, temporarily sealing the fortress. However, many Solonians remained inside, turning the battle into a brutal urban warfare. I and my dozen men stood back to back at the gate, facing the encroaching enemy. The outcome was inevitable. I became a blood-soaked war god, conducting a one-sided purge within Winterhome. The Solonian infantry stood no chance against my battle chi-infused blade. I struck with lethal precision, clearing the fortress interior as my men finished off the stragglers. Yet, I felt no joy, only mounting dread. I rushed to the highest watchtower, scanning for reinforcements or news of other forts. The sight froze my blood. Despair gripped me like a northern gale. Fire and smoke were everywhere, not just at Winterhome or Eaglenest. Along the Blackstone Pass, 2 other smaller fortresses were also engulfed in chaos. I could faintly hear the cries of the dying. Most devastatingly, the Plantagenet royal flags were being torn down, replaced by the Solonian wolfhead battle flags. The gates were opened from within, and Solonian cavalry poured through, heading toward the inner plains. The Solon cavalry, having cleared the fortresses, surged forward like a lethal flood, charging at full speed toward the undefended, dimly lit plains of the Plantagenet kingdom's northern territory. The small fortresses were merely obstacles. Their true objective was to breach the pass and rampage through the wealthy, defenseless hinterlands to loot, slaughter, and sow chaos. No! Friedrich roared in fury, his armored fist smashing against the stone battlement with enough force to crack it. I watched him stand there helplessly, unable to save the 3 besieged fortresses or halt the tide of enemy cavalry flooding into the plains. His only remaining, desperate hope lay with the Eagle's Nest fortress and Count Eisenberg, who commanded the North's most elite troops. Attack! Send your cavalry. Flank them now, and you can still stop them. Friedrich shouted silently toward the fortress, his eyes burning with anxiety. He knew that if Count Eisenberg deployed the Blackstone cavalry to strike the Solonians' flank, they could inflict massive casualties and contain the disaster. However, the scene that followed shattered his final hope. A detachment of Solon cavalry brazenly galloped through the shadows beneath the main walls of Eagle's Nest, right under the defenders' noses. The fortress responded only with a few sporadic musket shots and the dull roar of a single cannon. The projectiles struck a few unlucky Solonians, causing minor confusion, but nothing more. There was no sound of heavy gates opening, no thunderous horn of the Northern Iron Cavalry, and no elite flanking maneuver. Like a terrified turtle, Eagle's Nest remained huddled in its shell, offering only symbolic, meaningless resistance. It simply watched as the Solon army poured into the heart of the kingdom. Why? Why won't you attack? Friedrich's eyes were bloodshot. He was consumed by disbelief, disappointment, and the humiliation of betrayal. Eisenberg, you coward. You fool. You are a disgrace to the kingdom. He finally understood. Count Eisenberg cared nothing for the defense of the realm or the suffering of its people. His only strategy was to preserve himself and his army at all costs, sacrificing every other fortress, pass, village, and town. A wave of cold helplessness washed over the night. All his struggles had been rendered meaningless. Kneeling on the cold wall, leaning on his sword, Friedrich stared at the distant, smoke-shrouded plains with bloodshot eyes and profound despair. His mission had failed. Everything was lost. On August 27th, the 7th year of Heinrich XI, Blackstone Pass fell in a single night. The disaster had arrived. Field territory, Pearl Sea coast. An inconspicuous sloop drifted toward a desolate, dilapidated pier on the evening breeze. This was once winter's port on the southwest peninsula. Now, only charred pilings and a few shacks remained in the twilight. 3 figures stood at the bow, looking out of place in the desolation. The leader was a handsome young man in his early 20s, possessing an air of lazy detachment. He wore well-tailored, high-quality deep blue travel robes embroidered with subtle silver runes. He toyed with a crystalline prism, gazing thoughtfully toward the northern interior. This was Conrad von Schmidt, my brother, accompanied by 2 young apprentices. Morian, a tall, serious male apprentice, carried a heavy pack filled with books, scrolls, and alchemical tools. Lena, the more lively female apprentice, curiously surveyed the strange land, her short blonde hair fluttering in the wind. "Teacher, are we really going to walk across this wasteland?" Lena asked worriedly. "I heard it's crawling with Solon barbarians and deserters." Conrad didn't turn, his eyes fixed on the prism. "What choice do we have? Friend City is under siege, the roads are blocked. This is the only landing point near the northern coast. Walking is slow, but better than rotting in the academy with those pedantic old men." The prism, the star-flow scrying mirror, was an academy master's treasure capable of sensing distant, powerful magical fluctuations. Conrad had borrowed it to track a strange, massive dark magical summons emanating from the deep north. It was a spell fluctuation unlike anything he had encountered, capable of attracting and commanding magical creatures on a massive scale. This piqued his intense research interest. Combined with the Kingdom Gazette reports about my exploits, he decided to head north. He intended to investigate the phenomenon, see the brother who had suddenly become famous, and perhaps find a free place to stay and a patron. The boat docked, and the terrified captain urged them to disembark immediately. "Mages, we've arrived. Pay the balance, and we're square. I don't want to spend another second in this hellhole." Morian paid the large sum of gold without expression. The captain didn't even thank them, immediately ordering his crew to sail away from the cursed coast. Lena sighed as the sails faded. "Is he really that scared?" Conrad chuckled, stowing the mirror. "It's natural for commoners to fear the Solonians. Let's go, find somewhere to spend the night." They walked inland along a ruined path until a massive, charred ruin appeared. It was a castle burned to the ground, its skeletal remains looming in the twilight. "Here will do," Conrad said casually. "It looks spacious and undisturbed." They entered the main hall, finding only thick ash and charred timber. In a bedroom, Lena gasped. "Teacher, look, there's a corpse." Conrad and Morian approached. A charred, curled-up corpse lay in the corner, emitting a faint, burnt stench. Beside it lay scraps of what appeared to be scorched noble clothing. Conrad frowned, losing interest after a glance. Some unlucky fallen noble. Leave it, find a cleaner room. They were unaware that the ignored corpse was the former master of the territory, Baron Cyril von Eichberg. They eventually found a relatively intact stone storage room deep in the ruins. It was dusty, but provided shelter. Morian pulled enchanted fluorite rods from his pack, casting a soft light that dispelled the darkness. He then ignited a small copper mana furnace with a mana crystal, producing a silent, blue magical flame for heat. Lena heated a simple dinner of dried rations and oats. Conrad sat against the wall, observing the starflow, scrying mirror. The summoning fluctuation, it's getting clearer. The source seems to be toward Confort. Interesting. Could it be related to my heroic brother? Dinner was prepared, and I ate in silence with the trio. Afterward, Morian and Lena arranged their bedding. I watched Conrad stand by the window, gazing at the dark mountains, his eyes reflecting a scholar's curiosity. "Comfort, Carl, and that strange magic," he whispered. "I hope you bring me some unexpected surprises." Deep in the night, only the hum of magic flames and the steady breathing of my two companions and me filled the ruins. The Solonian siege of Conford had lasted 5 days, dulling the initial fear I had felt. I observed the defenders and serfs shift from panic to a numb, calm routine. The Solonians maintained a long-term blockade, performing only routine patrols without launching any real attacks that I could see. Life continued amidst the siege. I saw the fortress busy with the final stages of the autumn harvest. In the threshing ground, I watched men rhythmically beat dried rye with flails. I saw golden grains fall like rain, piling up. I watched women separate the grain from the chaff, bagging the harvest for the castle's reinforced granaries. The fields were not left idle under my watch. Under Mr. Moore's guidance, I saw serfs chop straw, mixing it with wood ash and manure for composting. This organic fertilizer was stored to nourish next spring's crops, as I had planned. I ensured the harvested grain was dried, threshed, and winnowed before being stored in new, ventilated granaries. I relied on guards and clear records to ensure these strategic supplies were secure. Defensive preparations continued unabated under my supervision. I watched Hector and his apprentices forge arrowheads and repair armor, while crafting siege weapon components. I saw Carpenter Elliot direct the construction of wolf-tooth slammers, rolling logs, and scaffolding to reinforce the walls. Morale remained high. I believed the people felt Conford would hold. Meanwhile, I sensed the atmosphere in the Solon camp was vastly different. Commander Hermid's tent hosted a disturbing guest. The visitor wore deep purple robes embroidered with eerie runes, his hood concealing all but a pale chin and thin lips. He exuded a chilling scent of herbs and decay that I could almost smell from afar. "Respected Mage Thor," Hermod said, masking his wariness. "Legion Commander Ulf has sent new orders." Thor looked up, his gray, emotionless eyes scanning Hermod. "And what does the Legion Commander desire?" "He orders us to breach Conford's outer walls immediately," Hermod replied. "We must force the Plantagenets back into the stone castle. Once we leave a small force to block the mountain pass, our main army can be redeployed for the commander's other plans." Thor's gray eyes shifted, waiting for the rest. Hermod licked his dry lips. "The Wolf Legion has successfully broken through Blackstone Pass. The path to the Plantagenet heartland is open." His tone was a mix of shock and greed. "The commander believes this is a golden opportunity. The Plantagenets have no army left. We must seize the wealth and slaves. We cannot let the Wolf and Bear legions take everything. We must crush Conford and head south to claim our share." Thor was silent for a moment. "So time is short. A direct assault?" Hermod nodded grimly. "Yes. No more slow sieges. The commander wants results while preserving our strength." He looked sharply at the mage. "He expects you to demonstrate the power you promised." Thor chuckled like a night owl. "The commander is impatient. I have the power, but magic, especially that which turns the tide, is never free. It requires a price." "A price?" Hermod frowned. "Grain? Gold? Materials?" "No," Thor said coldly. "Life, vibrant life force, and the pain and fear of death. That is the most effective fuel." Hermod's expression shifted. Thor saw his hesitation. "Are you, a commander who has seen countless deaths, stingy with a few lowly lives? For victory and tribal glory, this sacrifice is trivial." Hermod hesitated, his eyes flickering. Finally, he gritted his teeth and shouted to the guards, "Bring me some Plantagenet slaves." 5 ragged, starving Plantagenet captives were shoved into the tent. They were filled with terror, while Thor's gray eyes gleamed with satisfaction. He stood and retrieved an item from a black wooden box. It was an ancient, evil-looking artifact. It featured a skull bowl inlaid with obsidian and twisted runes. Below the bowl, 3 talons clutched a crystal ball filled with swirling dark red liquid. The artifact radiated a cold, greedy aura. "Hold them down," Thor commanded. As guards pinned the slaves, Thor began chanting in a distorted, incomprehensible language. He touched the slaves' foreheads with fingers glowing with ominous green light. The slaves convulsed, their eyes widening as they gasped in agony. Their life force and souls were forcibly extracted, flowing as pale mist and black-red resentment into the skull bowl. The red liquid boiled, and the crystal ball spun faster, emitting a blinding, sickening blood-red light. The 5 slaves withered rapidly, turning into twisted, lifeless husks. The process was so cruel that even the battle-hardened Hermod looked away in disgust. Thor, however, looked on with satisfaction. He raised the artifact high, his final chant piercing the air. A dark, terrifying ripple of energy pulsed from the artifact, sweeping across the camp and into the wilderness. Thor lowered the artifact, a cruel smile on his lips. He told the pale Hermod, "The bait is set. The hounds have been awakened and guided. By sunset tomorrow, you will see an army that knows no fear or death emerge from the wilderness to tear down Conford's walls. Tell your soldiers to prepare, not for battle, but to collect the corpses after my creations finish their work." Hermod suppressed his revulsion and nodded. "Understood. Order the army to be ready for the harvest tomorrow." At dawn the next day, I watched a sentry on the Conford walls get startled by a strange, clamorous noise. I saw him rub his eyes and peer nervously toward the Solon camp. I watched Richter turn pale as he looked out. The Solon camp, previously just tents and campfires, was now submerged under a terrifying, dark tide. It wasn't a Solonian army, but a swarm of monsters, countless magical creatures covering the entire field. Short goblins and taller, canine-headed kobolds hunched forward, brandishing pickaxes and hand axes while emitting low, guttural growls. More horrifying were the human-like ghouls with rotting skin and bloodthirsty, hollow eyes, moaning for flesh. An undead army crawled from a nightmare. There were tens of thousands of them, filling the open ground completely. Their stench and evil aura were so potent that I saw the sentries on the walls feel nauseous and panic from afar. Enemy attack. Monsters. So many monsters, a sentry screamed, scrambling down the wall in terror.